Hey guys, tonight we wander straight into the Ottoman Empire, a place where the ground beneath your feet is as stubborn as the people trying to farm it. You blink into the present tense haze of dry wind, rough stones, and hills rolling out like a crumpled rug someone forgot to flatten. The air smells like dust and smoke, and the sun is doing that thing where it pretends it's just warming you, while actually plotting your demise. You're already thinking, yeah, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is over there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across the uneven ground, feeling every pebble through sandals that could generously be described as optimistic. The lands of the empire stretch far, Anatolia's rocky mountains, the Balkans' dense forests, the Arab provinces' deserts, but none of them are particularly gentle. You walk through terrain that seems to be casually testing you, the way a cat tests gravity by pushing things off a table. Rivers flood when you least need them, mountain passes freeze when you forget to pack extra wool, and plains heat up so fast you'd swear someone turned the sun to high. This landscape shapes you long before any sultan does. A mainstream historical fact, the empire spanned 3 continents, meaning you deal with wild geographic swings, Mediterranean breezes one region over, suffocating heat the next. You might envy your future self who lives with air conditioning, ice water, and weather apps, but for now your forecast is essentially, hope for the best, prepare for the worst, cry internally when needed. As you continue walking, a donkey brays at you with the tired tone of someone who has seen too many humans choose the wrong road. Most villagers cling to whatever land can grow wheat or barley, and if you're lucky, maybe olives. You work soil that feels like it resists you from a philosophical standpoint. Plots are small, tools are basic, and if a rain cloud passes overhead, you treat it like a celebrity cameo. And here's your first quirky tidbit. Some villagers swear that putting iron tools under their beds protects their harvest from evil spirits. You roll your eyes gently, but honestly, after a few seasons of failed crops, you'd probably sleep with an entire blacksmith shop under your mattress if it helped. You pass a caravan trail, where travelers grind along in single file. The wind whips dust into your face, making you blink like you're tearing up at a dramatic movie scene you refuse to admit affects you. Pack animals groan, merchants shout. One guy is definitely singing off-key. You overhear 2 riders arguing about whether the land is cursed or just badly managed. Historians still argue whether the empire's environmental troubles came from climate cycles, poor agricultural planning, or a cosmic grudge. You're inclined to believe all 3. As you continue onward, the ground shifts from rocky to muddy, because the universe enjoys variety in your suffering. You nearly slip, catching yourself with what you hope looks like grace but definitely doesn't. A herder smirks at you. You pretend you didn't see it. You inhale the scent of wood smoke drifting from a distant village. People build homes from whatever the land provides. Stone if you have it, mud brick if you don't, timber if your region isn't already deforested. Inside, floors are often hard-packed earth, which does nothing for your arches. Walls are drafty, roofs leak, mosquitoes treat you like a buffet, and in winter, your breath fogs indoors more enthusiastically than outdoors. Cozy. Still, you make do, because everyone does. You adapt the same way your ancestors did, patching, mending, hoping the next storm goes around your house instead of through it. Sometimes it listens. Usually it doesn't. You approach a small farming settlement now. Children chase chickens, chickens chase bugs, and bugs chase absolutely nothing because they already run the world. A woman hauling water nods at you in that life is tough but we keep going sort of way. The jug she carries weighs enough to qualify as a gym workout. You think of how modern people complain about walking 10 steps to the sink. You chuckle softly and pretend you're not jealous. At the edge of the fields, men dig irrigation channels, long, back-breaking work done under the sun's judgmental gaze. One wipes sweat from his brow, muttering what you assume must be either a prayer or a very creative insult. The land is both gift and curse. It feeds you, but only after lengthy negotiations. You pause, catching sight of terraced hills in the distance. They're carved like steps for a giant, designed to capture every drop of moisture the land begrudgingly releases. Innovations like these help the population survive. yet the land still dictates your pace. A single crop failure can set off food shortages, migration, even revolt. You feel that tension like a constant hum beneath your feet, never loud, never silent. Nearby, a man proudly shows off a gourd he believes is enchanted because it grew larger than average. You nod politely. Between you and me, it's just a gourd, but hope is fuel, and people here burn through hope quickly. You keep walking, observing how every step ties you more tightly to the land's whims. It's not cruel, not kind, just indifferent. You learn to read clouds like letters, soil like warnings, wind like gossip. Sometimes the sky fools you, sometimes the earth surprises you, and sometimes both conspire to teach you patience. You breathe in deeply, letting the dusty air settle in your lungs. The sun dips lower, softening the harsh edges of the world. Even as life presses down on you, there's a strange beauty to it. The resilience, the rhythm, the endless dance between survival and surrender. And as the day winds on, you realize that every hardship here, every stony field, every burning sky, shapes who you become. In this empire, the land is your first teacher, your constant test, and your oldest challenge. You continue onward as the dusty trail weaves you deeper into the empire's tangled human tapestry, a place where people don't just bump elbows, they overlap, intersect, and collide in ways that make your head spin slightly more than the heat already does. In the Ottoman world, you share space with Turks, Arabs, Greeks, Armenians, Kurds, Jews, Slavs, Roma, and more groups than your tired brain can comfortably juggle. You're surrounded by so many languages that you occasionally wonder if your ears are glitching. You shuffle into a busy market town, and immediately you're swallowed by sound. A vendor calling in Turkish, a woman bargaining in Greek, a pair of travelers joking in Armenian, and someone shouting, "Move!" in a tone that needs no translation. You drift through this patchwork like a thread, trying anxiously to figure out where it belongs in the quilt. The empire prides itself on its diversity. This is your mainstream historical fact for the section. The Ottoman millet system allowed religious communities to govern many of their own internal affairs. But the reality at ground level isn't quite as graceful as the textbooks imply. It's more like living in a giant mixed dormitory where everyone cooks their own food, follows their own rules, and occasionally argues about whose goat is chewing whose laundry. You take in the smells: sizzling lamb, old leather, rosewater perfume, and something suspiciously cabbage adjacent. Children dart past you, laughing in a mishmash of languages. One tosses a walnut at another with surprisingly good aim. Someone bumps your shoulder, muttering an apology you only halfway understand. You nod politely, because politeness is the universal language of "please don't make this awkward." And as you wade deeper into the town square, you realize coexistence here isn't optional. It's baked into the walls, the streets, the morning rituals. You learn quickly that harmony is less about agreement and more about choreography, everyone stepping carefully, adjusting their rhythm to avoid smashing into their neighbors. And occasionally, of course, someone does smash in, but life keeps going. A quirky tidbit for you. Some travelers swear that in certain mixed cities, you could hear 5 different religious calls in the same hour: church bells, muezzins, rabbinical chants, Sufi poetry, and someone banging a pot to scare off pigeons. You imagine your modern noise-sensitive neighbours trying to file a complaint. The thought almost makes you laugh out loud. You wander toward a fountain, where several women fill clay jars. Their scarves differ by community. Some patterned, some plain, some brightly coloured. One woman looks you over, not rudely, just cataloguing you like everyone does strangers here. You're aware that your clothing, your accent, even the way you stand can betray your origins. In a place this diverse, identity is visible long before introductions. A man selling spices gestures for you to come closer. You do, mostly because he waves at you with the confidence of someone who has waved at everyone since sunrise. He shows you saffron, pepper, sumac, and something he claims will make your troubles vanish. You resist asking whether it also makes your chores vanish, because sarcasm is not universally appreciated. He launches into a story about how his grandfather came from somewhere far away. Depending on who you ask, everyone here comes from somewhere far away. You nod along, warm with the pleasant sense of belonging that comes from being equally confused with everyone else. Still, beneath the lively exchange, there's always a quiet tension humming like an uncomfortably honest background soundtrack. Cultures blend, yes, but they also bump, scrape, and occasionally spark. At one end of the street, a Greek merchant complains loudly about unfair tax collectors. Across from him, a Turkish baker rolls his eyes so dramatically you could swear he's training for theatre. Up the street, two young men argue about whose ancestors settled here first, as if ancient bragging rights improve crop yields. This is where your scholarly debate requirement sneaks in. Historians still argue whether the empire's multicultural system produced genuine tolerance or merely a functional top-down equilibrium where cooperation was expected, not necessarily felt. You sense pieces of both. Some days you see kindness, other days you feel invisible borders you didn't know you crossed. You step into a side alley for a moment of quiet. Big mistake. A rooster charges at you, flapping its wings like it's defending the honor of its entire species. You leap backward, which is a perfectly dignified reaction, thank you very much. A nearby kid snickers. You pretend not to care, but the rooster definitely won. Returning to the main street, you notice how architecture itself mirrors the empire's mosaic nature. Churches turned into mosques, synagogues tucked into merchant districts, coffee houses sitting beside taverns and bathhouses. Every building whispers layered histories, like someone scribbled new stories over old ones without ever fully erasing the ink. You pass a caravanserai, a sort of medieval motel for travellers. Inside you hear snippets of faraway lives, a Persian trader complaining about the humidity, a Bosnian shepherd talking about wolves bold enough to steal laundry, and a Jewish scholar debating lunar calendars with a Sufi poet. You settle near the doorway, listening with half-closed eyes, feeling the world widen and tangle around you. Someone hands you a small cup of thick Ottoman coffee, the kind so strong it feels like it could climb out of the cup and walk away. You sip it anyway, because you're tired and because refusing hospitality in this world is like declining Wi-Fi access in modern times. You technically can, but why would you? A storyteller sits on a low stool, spinning tales of heroes, lost empires, mischievous spirits, and impossible love. The crowd leans in, enthralled, kids resting their elbows on their parents' knees. You stand among them, swaying gently with the rhythm of his voice. For a moment, life feels soft, woven, shared, and just when you're sinking into that warmth, someone in the back erupts into an argument. Apparently, the storyteller mispronounced the name of a long-dead king. The storyteller throws up his hands, the audience groans, you sigh, reminded that in any diverse community, disagreement is just a heartbeat away. Still, as evening light filters through the streets, painting stone walls with gold, you feel the empire's strange beauty settle into you. Hardship is real, yes. Differences are sharp. But somehow this chaotic mix of people keeps moving, singing, arguing, cooking, trading, praying, laughing, and surviving together even when it isn't easy. You move with them, carried by the crowd into the gentle fold of evening, where the noise mellowing into quiet hums reminds you of the subtle truth you've been feeling all along. In the Ottoman Empire, living among many isn't just daily life. It's the challenge, the miracle, and sometimes the trouble. You shuffle farther down the winding road, feeling the weight of the day on your shoulders. But little do you know, the real weight you carry isn't your bundle of belongings. It's the invisible mountain of taxes strapped to your back like an unwelcome travel companion who insists on breathing loudly. In the Ottoman Empire, there's a tax for everything. Land, animals, crops, beehives, shops, boats, windows. Sometimes you suspect they'd charge you for blinking if they could find a way to count it accurately. You reach a small administrative outpost, the kind where the walls tilt suspiciously and the doorway looks like it's been repaired with hope rather than actual carpentry. A few villagers stand in line, clutching small coins with the same expression people today reserve for dentist appointments. You sigh, knowing you're about to join them, because the empire always collects its due, even if you don't feel particularly due today. As you wait, a man ahead of you mutters about the Harak tax, another groans about the Sizi, and someone in the back swears they heard a rumour about a shadow tax on the shape of your roof. You're pretty sure he made that one up, but honestly, you wouldn't be surprised. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The empire's tax system was sprawling and complex, with separate categories for landholders, craftsmen, non-Muslim subjects, pastoralists and merchants. The logic behind it technically existed, but to the average person like you, it feels about as understandable as a riddle written on a spinning wheel. Finally, you reach the front of the line. The tax clerk looks at you with that universal bureaucratic face, the one that says, "I didn't create this system, but I will absolutely enforce it." He asks what you owe, flips through a ledger thicker than a winter blanket, and assigns you a number you're pretty sure he just invented on the spot. You hand over your coins, praying he won't suddenly remember another rule you've violated. He pauses, squints at you, and you brace yourself, but then he simply nods and waves you off. You exhale, as if you've just survived emotional combat. As you step outside, sunlight warms your face, but it's the kind of warmth that says, "Congrats on paying taxes. Now go earn more so we can take those too." You walk back toward the village with the resigned gait of someone who knows the cycle never ends. Around you, people grumble as they head home. One farmer complains that he barely harvested enough wheat to feed his family, let alone satisfy the tax collectors. A shepherd whispers that he hides 2 goats in his neighbour's shed every collection season. A tactic you find morally questionable, but tactically brilliant. A potter insists he's being taxed on pots he didn't emotionally connect with, which is your cue to slowly edge away before getting dragged into a rant. You pause to watch a travelling merchant unload goods. Spices, beads, tools, bolts of fabric, all beautiful, all expensive. That's because merchants get taxed at nearly every step of their journeys. Roads, bridges, city gates, ports, each one demands a toll. It's like the Empire looked at modern streaming services and thought, what if everything required a subscription? A quirky tidbit for you. Some Ottoman tax collectors used to carry little metal seals shaped like animals, and they'd stamp documents with whichever creature matched the type of tax. Goat for livestock tax, fish for river tariffs, etc. Imagine paying a fee only to receive a document decorated with a smug bronze goat staring back at you. Truly humbling. As you wander back toward your lodging, you overhear a heated argument between 2 elders debating whether taxes were lighter under the previous sultan or just differently painful. Grown men squint at each other as if staring hard enough might reveal the truth. Someone throws in a story about how his grandfather paid taxes with onions for an entire season. Apparently they were cherished enough to be accepted. You silently hope your descendants never have to file something like Form 7B, onion equivalent payments. You pass by a coffee house, the Empire's informal think tank. Inside, men sit on low stools debating politics with the intensity of people who know their words will never reach the palace, but enjoy pretending they might. Smoke curls into the rafters, coffee, cups clink, and arguments swirl around topics like corruption, tax reform, and, of course, whose ancestor invented baklava first. This is where your scholarly debate requirement drifts in like a curious cat. Historians still argue whether the Ottoman tax structure was oppressive by design, or simply overwhelmed by the empire's vast size and constant financial needs. Some say local collectors abused the system. Others say the system itself asked too much. You personally say yes to all of it because nuance is tiring and you've had enough for one day. You head toward a field where a group of villagers work together repairing an irrigation canal. Every so often someone sighs, mutters about taxes again, and resumes digging. It's the community equivalent of venting to co-workers near the office printer. Someone jokes that if the empire taxed sighing, they'd all be bankrupt by sunset. Everyone laughs, then stops, then laughs again out of emotional necessity. As the sun slides lower, you stroll through the village centre. A scribe sits beneath a tree recording who paid what today. He scratches notes with the grim dedication of someone who knows that any error will result in angry neighbours showing up at dawn. You offer him a sympathetic look. He returns one that clearly says, "Free me." Nearby, a young boy playfully tips a basket of apples to make a fake offering to a goat mimicking a tax collector's pomp. The adults laugh, softly, nervously, because humour is the only affordable luxury left. You finally reach your small lodging and sink onto a wooden stool. Your feet ache, your back protests, and your coin pouch feels lighter than your optimism. But in the quiet, you also sense something else. A quiet camaraderie forged through shared strain. Everyone here pays, everyone struggles, everyone survives. Not gracefully, not easily, but together. The day wanes, shadows stretch. Somewhere a rooster crows again for reasons known only to itself, and you settle into the warm realization that in an empire full of difficulties, taxes may grind you down, but they also remind you that you're part of a vast, complicated world, carrying on like countless souls before you. You wake the next morning hoping, praying that today will be a little quieter, a little gentler, a little less Ottoman. But as you step outside and stretch your tired limbs, you instantly feel it. That subtle pressure in the air, like someone watching from just beyond the edge of the scene. And sure enough, when you follow the line of curious gazes from the villagers, you see them, matching uniforms, polished boots, disciplined formation, and that unmistakable presence. The Janissaries have arrived. You freeze for a moment, mostly because your brain whispers, "Do not make sudden movements. These men have opinions about everything." The Janissaries aren't just soldiers, they're an institution, a shadow stretching across the empire, long and wide enough that you feel it even when they're not in your village. They march through the town with precision that makes you instantly aware of how uneven your own walking posture usually is. Their steps hit the ground in unison, echoing off the stone walls like a drum beat reminding everyone who truly holds power. You try to act casual, the way people today pretend not to care when police lights flash behind them, even though absolutely everyone cares. You know the basics, of course. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Janissaries were an elite infantry corps, initially formed from the Devsham system, boys taken from Christian families in the Balkans, converted to Islam, and trained as the Sultan's loyal soldiers. In theory, they're disciplined, obedient, and devoted to the throne. In practice, well, let's just say they have thoughts, and demands, and a surprising capacity for expressing those demands loudly. A boy next to you whispers that he wants to be a Janissary when he grows up. His mother immediately shushes him, because ambition is wonderful, but speaking too loudly near the Empire's most politically involved military force is unwise. The commander dismounts a tall, sleek horse, and the way the crowd instinctively parts makes you think the horse understands its authority too. The commander's armor glints in the early sunlight, polished to a shine that would make a magpie weep. He surveys the town with the calm confidence of someone who has never once worried about taxes or roofs, or whether he remembered to salt the goat meat enough to avoid poisoning his entire household. One of the soldiers notices you lingering and gives a nod, firm, unreadable. Not friendly, not hostile, just the kind of nod that says, "I know you exist, and that's enough for now." You return the nod with the exact amount of non-committal politeness required for survival. Nearby, villagers murmur in hushed tones. Someone claims the Janissaries are here to collect supplies for a campaign. Someone else insists they are merely passing through. A third dramatically suggests they're here because of a rooster-related disturbance last week. You decide not to ask. A quirky tidbit floats to your memory. Some Janissaries used to march with massive kettle drums strapped to camels, thundering across fields so loudly that enemies reportedly fled before seeing a single soldier. You try to imagine hearing giant camel drums approaching your village at dawn is either terrifying or the start of a great music festival. The commander begins speaking with the local officials. You can't hear everything, but you catch enough to understand the message. The Sultan expects loyalty, the army needs provisions, and the village needs to cooperate because, well, it's good for everyone's continued breathing. The negotiations are civil, but the tension is as visible as a camel in a pottery shop. While the officials scramble, the Janissaries spread out slightly, watching everything. Their hands rest near their weapons, relaxed, but not too relaxed. Children stare with wide eyes. Dogs slink away. Even the chickens reconsider their life choices. You edge closer to a group of elders discussing the situation with the kind of earnest theatricality that only lifelong worry can produce. They debate whether the Janissaries of today are as elite as those of old, or whether they've grown too political. This perfectly sets you up for your scholarly debate requirement. Historians still argue whether the Janissaries' increasing power and involvement in palace politics strengthened the empire or contributed to its long-term instability. You personally vote for both, as is tradition when conflicts are exhausting. One elder insists the Janissaries once trained so rigorously that they could run for miles without losing breath. Another counters that nowadays some are more interested in coffeehouse gossip than battlefield discipline. A third adds that no one should criticize soldiers who can hear you from 20 paces. At that, the entire group subtly disperses. You wander toward the edge of the square and spot a few Janissaries inspecting goods. Sacks of grain, bundles of wool, barrels of salted fish. One lifts a fish by the tail and sniffs it with the grim determination of someone who has smelled far worse in his career. He grunts approval. The merchant exhales like he just dodged spiritual judgment. To ease the tension in your own chest, you crack a joke in your mind. If Janissaries had Yelp, every village would get rated on grain quality and obedience. You decide it's for the best that such a system does not exist. The soldiers begin distributing orders. Some locals are asked to assist with provisions, others must prepare lodging. One particularly unlucky man is told to provide his barn for the horses. He nods in agreement, even though his facial features scream, "But that's where I store my dreams." You pat his shoulder sympathetically as you pass. Despite their imposing presence, you notice something unexpected. A few of the younger Janissaries look just as overwhelmed as you feel. Their eyes scan the unfamiliar village with curiosity and caution, gripping spears not with swagger but with responsibility. For a second, you glimpse the humanity beneath the uniform, beneath the reputation. Kids trained into warriors, carrying the empire on their backs, whether they asked for that weight or not. You drift toward a well where a small group of villagers gossip about rumours, how Janissaries once overturned a sultan they disliked, how they demanded higher wages, how they sometimes refused orders. People lower their voices like the name Janissary itself might summon a soldier from thin air. You edge away slowly because you would like to continue existing. Gradually the soldiers prepare to depart. Hooves clatter, armour clinks, orders echo. As they move out, the village releases a collective sigh so synchronised it could qualify as choir practice. You join them, feeling your shoulders loosen and your heart settle. The road is quiet again, but the shadow remains. Not ominous, just present. A reminder that in this empire, power isn't distant. It walks beside you, passes through your fields, and sometimes nods in your direction with unsettling neutrality. You continue forward, carrying the memory of polished boots, stern faces, kettle drum legends, and quiet debates. And in the hush that follows, you find yourself grateful for simple sounds. The rustle of leaves, the creak of a cart, the faint cluck of a recovering chicken. Life resumes, so do you. You walk on, hoping the road ahead will finally give you something simple. Maybe a breeze, maybe a friendly wave, maybe a sign from the universe that says relax. Nothing else is going to go wrong today. But the universe in the Ottoman Empire has a sense of humour, and it usually prefers the dark comedy genre. Because as you round a bend and enter a sunburned stretch of countryside, you're greeted by something more troubling than soldiers or taxes: silence. Not peaceful silence, hungry silence. The kind where birdsong sounds thinner, fields look paler, and people move with that slow, careful gait of those who are trying to stretch their energy across too many hours. You realise quickly that the village you're approaching is dealing with food trouble. Not a complete famine yet, just the uneasy beginnings of one, the kind that makes everyone glance at the sky as though it owes them an explanation. A pair of farmers haul a cart of grain past you. The sacks look pathetically small, as if fate took one look at the harvest and said, "I'm just going to leave you with the demo version this year." You give them a sympathetic nod. They return it with the look of people who haven't had a full stomach in weeks. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Food shortages were common in parts of the empire due to fluctuating grain prices, limited infrastructure, climate swings, and long supply chains that made feeding major cities, like Istanbul, difficult. Add in drought, war disruptions, pest infestations, and the occasional locust visit, because apparently nature also enjoys surprise inspections, and you have an economy that wobbles whenever the crops do. You step into the village square, where the well-worn rhythm of daily life has been replaced with anxious murmurs. Women sort through baskets of vegetables, carefully examining each item like it's a rare treasure. A butcher sharpens his knife, even though he has only one thin cut of meat displayed on his table. A sad little slice that looks like it's been contemplating its purpose in life. A kid asks his mother when dinner will be ready. She strokes his hair and says, "Soon," drawing out the word like she's stretching dough that keeps shrinking back. You watch quietly, the weight of it settling in your chest. You wander toward a bread stall where the loaves are smaller than usual and cost more than yesterday. The baker shrugs apologetically. He explains that flour shipments haven't arrived, taxes rose again, and the miller 2 villages away broke his arm falling off a mule. You decide not to ask how that last detail affects bread production, but he definitely seems stressed enough that it does. You buy a piece of bread anyway. It's chewy, dense, and tastes faintly of despair. You pretend it's delicious. As you chew, you overhear a man ranting dramatically about grain merchants hoarding supplies. Another insists bandits intercepted shipments. A third swears the Sultan secretly eats half the empire's wheat for breakfast. You gently suspect he made that up. A quirky tidbit floats your way. Some Ottoman households used to store dried watermelon seeds as emergency snacks during famine years. You picture yourself crunching watermelon seeds for dinner and can't decide whether that's charming or depressing. Probably both. A group gathers near a storage building inspecting a nearly empty granary. The elders sigh collectively, the universal sign of things are not going well. One mutters that he remembers a famine decades ago, when people ground acorns into flour, and even that ran out. Another recalls eating stew thickened with tree bark. You smile politely but mentally note that your digestive system is not prepared for medieval tree cuisine. As you stand there listening, the mood of the village shifts, anxiety twisting slowly into that stubborn resilience humans cling to when everything else becomes unstable. People begin discussing rationing, helping neighbours, stretching supplies. Someone suggests foraging for edible herbs in the hills. A woman volunteers to teach everyone a recipe involving chickpeas, onions, and a lot of hope. You make your way toward the fields to see the cause firsthand. The wheat stalks sway irregularly, patchy in places, wilted in others. You crouch down, letting the dry soil crumble in your fingers. It's light, powdery, almost void of life. You whisper a few words to it, as if the earth itself might be soothed by your concern. It isn't. From behind you, a farmer approaches. He talks about inconsistent rainfall, unusual heat, and that one cloud last month that drifted by with attitude but no rain. You both look up at the sky. It stares back blankly. This gives you a perfect moment for your scholarly debate requirement. Historians still argue whether the worsening food crises in the later empire stemmed mostly from climate change, economic mismanagement, imperial priorities, or simply bad luck hitting at bad times. You personally vote for all of the above, and also the cloud with an attitude. Walking back toward the village, you notice how hunger shapes everything. Conversations soften, trades become delicate. People walk slower, not from laziness but strategy. A donkey grazes on sparse grass, tearing at each blade as though memorizing its flavor. At a small home, an elderly woman invites you to sit. She pours you a bowl of watery soup that mostly smells like onions thinking about onions. You thank her sincerely. She smiles with the quiet dignity of someone who has learned to share even when little exists. Inside her home, dried herbs hang from the rafters, along with bunches of garlic that look more decorative than nutritional at this point. She tells you stories of seasons when the river overflowed and crops thrived, when children grew plump and cheerful, when the village celebrated harvest festivals with songs that lasted through the night. You can tell she misses those days deeply, but speaks of them softly, like a memory she keeps wrapped in cloth. As you leave, the afternoon sun dips low, turning the world gold and warm, almost mocking considering the circumstances. You walk back through the square, watching villagers prepare the evening meal with careful measurement. A boy sits by the fire pit, stirring lentils as though they must be coaxed into tenderness, with gentle encouragement. You inhale the mingled scents of herbs, smoke, and the faintest trace of food, and you realize something quietly beautiful. Even through scarcity, life still finds a rhythm. Hardship narrows the world, but also sharpens connections. People lean on each other, share what little they have, and tell jokes that are only half funny, but 100% necessary. A man shouts across the square, "At least we've still got water." Another replies, "Don't say that out loud." Everyone laughs nervously. You do too. As night slides across the sky, you sit on a low stone wall, nibbling what's left of your bread. Crickets chirp, fires crackle. Somewhere a baby cries. Somewhere else someone sings a soft lullaby. The village endures. And as you watch the stars appear, slow, gentle, indifferent, you feel the subtle truth settle into your bones. Hunger reshapes you, but it also teaches you the weight and wonder of survival. In this empire, food is never just food. It's fate, fortune, fear, and hope intertwined. You wake with a stiff neck, a sore back, and a strong suspicion that your bed, and you use that word generously, is plotting against you. Ottoman households aren't built for comfort. They're built for survival. And as you push open the creaky wooden door of your lodging, You step right into the chaotic duet of the Empire's climate. Scorching heat punching you in the face from one side, icy wind threatening your ankles from the other. It's a whole personality. You take a breath, already sweating. The morning sun blasts down like it's auditioning for the role of villain number one in your personal story. Even the chickens look tired. A black cat sprawls in the shade with the dramatic exhaustion of someone who has truly given up on temperature consistency. Ottoman life, you quickly learn, doesn't come with insulation, air conditioning, or even walls that politely mind their own business. Your house is a mashup of whatever materials Mother Nature hasn't thrown a tantrum about recently. Mud brick, rough-cut stone, wood beams and roof tiles that always seem one strong wind away from becoming airborne. This is the Empire's great atmospheric joke. In summer, houses feel like clay ovens. In winter, you can exhale indoors and watch your breath drift away like a spirit escaping your body. Cozy, sure, if your definition of cozy involves numb fingers and accidental frostbite. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Ottoman Empire spanned many climates, from the frigid Balkans to the blistering deserts of Arabia. Homes and daily life had to adapt constantly, often poorly, because no unified architectural solution could satisfy conditions this wildly inconsistent. You step back inside briefly to gather your things, and your foot touches the hard-packed earth floor. Cold, uneven, and as unforgiving as a tax collector. Floors like these send a very clear message. Good morning? Suffer. You adjust your sandals, wishing for socks thick enough to double as emotional support animals. As you head out again, you admire a neighbor's roof. Layers of tiles weighed down with rocks to keep them from flying off during storms. Ingenious, also concerning. The woman tending the house nods at you as though to say, yes, danger lurks above. Accept it. A gust of wind rips through the alley, kicking dust into your face. You flinch, blinking rapidly. A passing boy grins at your expression like he's just witnessed slapstick comedy unfold in slow motion. Congratulations, you've entertained the youth. To escape the heat, you wander toward the communal oven area where families bake bread early in the morning. The stones radiate warmth even now, though you can already tell that by noon they'll be hotter than philosophical debates in a coffee house. Women knead dough while chatting about the weather, complaining in a way that transcends cultures and centuries. I hear the winter will be harsh, one says. No, the spring rains will drown us first, another replies. You silently vote for whichever option sounds least deadly at the moment. A man sitting nearby offers you a cup of water from a clay jug cooled in the shade. You take it gratefully, only to swallow and realize it still tastes faintly of the jug itself. You thank him anyway because hydration is hydration, even when flavored with clay essence. A quirky tidbit pops into your mind. Some Ottoman households used to line their walls or roofs with animal dung to help insulate against cold weather. Yes, ancient insulation powered by bovine generosity. People swore it worked. You choose to believe them, mostly because it's too early in the day to emotionally process alternatives. As the sun climbs higher, you walk toward the fields just to catch a breeze. Instead, you catch a blast of heat that wraps around you like an overenthusiastic hug from a friend who doesn't understand personal space. Your shirt sticks to your back, your forehead sparkles with sweat, and somewhere in the distance a sheep bleats in solidarity. A shepherd waves at you, raising his hand lazily, as though even his greeting is melting. He tells you that summer brings cracked lips, dry wells, and the kind of fatigue that makes you want to lie on the ground and reconsider your entire life philosophy. You nod deeply. He nods back. It's a moment of profound, sweaty understanding. Afternoons in the Empire are brutal. You're lucky if you can find shade that stays put. Buildings cast narrow shadows that shift every 5 minutes, forcing you to play an unwilling game of chase the shade. You watch as workers stack firewood, preparing for winter even though the heat is currently trying to murder everyone. This brings your scholarly debate requirement into play. Historians still argue whether climate trends in the Ottoman Empire, like the Little Ice Age, significantly worsened economic hardship or merely complicated an already difficult daily life. You feel this debate deeply because your mood shifts the exact same way the weather does. By midday, the village air is thick and shimmering. Dogs lie flat on their bellies. Chickens pant. You briefly consider doing the same, but decide dignity is still worth something. Barely. You return to your lodging to escape the worst of the heat. You step inside, and instantly the room feels 10 degrees cooler. Relief washes over you, until a cold draft snakes up your leg from a mysterious gap between stones. You sigh. This room has the temperature stability of a broken oven. You lie on your mat, which is honestly just a polite term for fabric on the floor. The woven reeds underneath poke your ribs like they're trying to remind you you're alive. You shift, wiggle, shift again. Nothing helps. Ottoman comfort is an illusion. Later, when the sun finally begins its slow descent, villagers emerge with renewed energy, like nocturnal creatures confused about their species. Lamps flicker on, the breeze softens. Families cook dinner outdoors to avoid filling their homes with heat. Lentils simmer, onions sizzle, bread reheats on flat stones. You sit near a group of neighbours and listen to them discuss the cold months ahead. Someone jokes that sleeping on a wooden platform in winter is like sleeping on a frozen loaf of bread. Someone else adds that at least bread is softer. The group chuckles exhaustedly. Another neighbour explains how families pile blankets, wool rugs, and all available relatives into one room for warmth. "If you're not at least a little crushed," she says, "you're not sleeping correctly." You smile because honestly, same. As night settles, temperatures drop fast. You wrap your shawl tighter, grateful for the cool air after the day's assault, but aware that this pleasant chill becomes biting cold in a different season. The Empire doesn't do moderation, it specializes in extremes. Walking back to your bed, you reflect on how climate shapes everything here. Work hours, food storage, survival strategies, even relationships. The weather isn't just background, it's the silent character influencing every scene. In this world, being tough isn't optional, it's daily practice. You lie down again on your stubbornly unforgiving mat, the floor groans, the wind sneaks in, a mosquito buzzes by your ear in that "I'm about to ruin your evening" tone. You swat half-heartedly, but you also breathe deeply. The air is cooler now, the stars peek through the window, and even though the Ottoman climate treats you like a chew toy, you're still here, enduring, adapting, laughing quietly at the absurdity of it all. Because in this empire, survival isn't just an action, it's a lifestyle. You wake the next morning with a tickle in your throat, not the cute kind, but the ominous kind that whispers, "Congratulations, something in the air is poisoning you." You cough once, twice, and then remember exactly where you are. The Ottoman Empire, a place where disease lurks with the enthusiasm of a bored cat knocking cups off a table. As you step outside, the village has a strange stillness to it. Not silent exactly, but subdued. People speak in softer voices. Doors open cautiously. A woman sweeping her doorstep keeps glancing toward the healer's house, with the worry of someone mentally inventorying her herb supply. You get that prickle on the back of your neck that tells you something is off. Sure enough, a pair of elders whisper as you pass. You catch a few words. Fever, rash, coughing. You swallow hard. Great. Another day, another potential plague. Here's your mainstream historical fact for today. The Ottoman Empire faced recurring outbreaks of diseases like plague, smallpox, malaria, typhus, and a whole buffet of ailments modern medicine has thankfully retired. Cities like Istanbul were hit repeatedly, sometimes losing huge portions of their populations. You walk down the street trying to look calm while internally performing several emotional cartwheels. You pass a man sitting outside his home, wrapped in a blanket despite the warmth. His wife fans him with a palm leaf, her expression tight with worry. You offer a sympathetic nod, then immediately scold yourself for breathing too deeply near him. You continue your cautious stroll, mentally chanting, "You're fine, you're healthy, you definitely washed your hands sometime this week." The universe chuckles. A healer emerges from her small wooden hut carrying bundles of herbs. Lavender, thyme, pennyroyal, bundles that smell good enough to distract you for half a second. She's the busiest person in town right now, moving with the grim efficiency of someone who knows her work is both appreciated and feared. You follow the footpath toward the market, hoping to avoid too much bad news. Joke's on you. The market is practically a gossip beehive. Barrels of olives sit untouched. Fishmongers look annoyed that fewer customers approach. A man selling honey loudly insists that his honey kills disease on contact. He gestures dramatically with a ladle. You decide that's not how science works, but he seems very committed to the idea. As you wander deeper, you overhear someone say, "The plague mouse spirits are angry." You blink, because that's a take. A quirky tidbit pops up from the recesses of your brain. Some Ottoman communities believed in strange protective rituals, burning vinegar, fumigating with herbs, hanging garlic bundles, or writing protective verses above doors. You look around and spot all of them in action. By the looks of it, this village is throwing every available superstition at the problem. In one corner, a barber surgeon sharpens. His tools, an unsettling sight on any day, but especially today. You give him a wide berth. He sees you avoiding him and shrugs like, "Suit yourself." You agree wholeheartedly. Children, usually energetic at this hour, play quietly today. They draw shapes in the dirt while glancing at adults for reassurance. One girl holds a doll made of cloth scraps and murmurs a protective rhyme to it. You get a tiny pang in your chest, the recognition that kids everywhere sense fear, even when adults pretend everything is normal. You approach the fountain to wash your hands, splashing cool water onto your face. Someone beside you whispers, "Don't touch your eyes." You immediately have the overwhelming urge to touch your eyes. Excellent. Nearby, two elders debate the finer points of divine punishment versus environmental contamination. One insists the sickness came from rats carrying spirits of vengeance. The other says it's definitely the river, because water hasn't tasted confident lately. This is your scholarly debate moment. Historians still argue whether plague outbreaks in the empire were mostly driven by trade routes, climate, sanitation levels, or luck. You're personally blaming everything equally because balance is important. You walk toward a cluster of homes where several families have hung bright blue beads, Nazar bon Kugu, protective charms meant to ward off the evil eye. They sway gently in the breeze, catching glints of sunlight. You remember seeing them everywhere in the empire, on homes, on babies, on donkeys, even on one very confident rooster. Protection is protection. As you linger, a young boy taps your arm. "Mister, do sick people turn blue?" he asks earnestly. You crouch down, choosing your words carefully. "No," you say, "but the beads help people feel safer." He nods solemnly, the kind of nod that says he will tell exactly 15 friends about this new wisdom. You move on, finally reaching the outskirts of the village where fields spread out toward distant hills. Fresh air, fewer coughs, fewer anxious faces. You inhale deeply, then panic briefly. Remembering panic is your default now. But the breeze here is clean, carrying the scent of wild grass and warm earth. A shepherd sits under an olive tree humming softly while his sheep graze. He gestures for you to join him. You do, grateful for a moment of quiet. He tells you stories of past outbreaks, how his parents survived 3, how entire households sometimes vanished, how people learned to adapt by keeping distance and burning bedding. You listen carefully, absorbing every detail with a shiver. He laughs suddenly, pointing at a goat nibbling his sleeve. "At least goats don't get plague," he says. You're not entirely sure that's accurate, but the goat looks smugly healthy, so maybe it knows something you don't. As the sun climbs, the village heats up, and you decide to wander back. People move slower now, pacing themselves, conserving strength. The healer makes her rounds. Families check on each other from doorways, offering broth, herbs, and comfort. Fear hums through the air, yes, but so does community. When you reach the square again, someone is reading aloud from a religious text, offering reassurance and hope. People gather round, listening with eyes closed. A woman lays a hand on another's shoulder. A man offers his last clove of garlic to a neighbour. You feel the warmth of solidarity even as the threat lingers. By evening, the village settles into a strange mixture of caution and routine. Smoke drifts from chimneys. Lamps glow softly. Kids finally chase each other again, though with slightly more distance. The barber surgeon packs up his tools, thankfully unused today. You return to your bed, exhausted but strangely comforted. Disease walks the empire like an unwelcome traveller, but so do resilience, support, and stubborn hope. You lie down, breathing slowly. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hoots with the dramatic flair of someone who knows they're interrupting your attempt at calm. You let your eyes close anyway. Because in this empire, danger is constant, but so is the will to endure. You wake up before the sun, mostly because someone outside is already shouting at a donkey, a classic Ottoman alarm clock. You rub your eyes, stretch your stiff limbs, and immediately remember the universal truth of this era. Rest is a luxury, work is your destiny, and your spine is a negotiable participant in this arrangement. You step outside into the cool dawn air. Villagers are already moving with that half-zombie, half-determined shuffle that people everywhere adopt at unreasonable hours. You join them, because if you don't start working now, the day will outrun you before breakfast. Ottoman life thrives on labour. Hard labour, long labour, labour that makes your modern self want to lie down and weep softly. There's no 8-hour workday here. Work starts when the light appears and ends when your body begs for mercy. Even then, there's usually something else to do. Mend a tool, fetch water, check animals, repair a roof tile that won't stop threatening to fall onto your face in the next windstorm. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Most people in the empire, whether in villages or cities, worked grueling hours in agriculture, craft guilds, construction, shipping, or domestic service. Breaks were rare, and days off mostly involved religious festivals, or recovering from illness, which hardly counts as leisure. You head toward the fields with a group of farmers. Their tools clank against each other, hoes, sickles, wooden ploughs, simple, durable, slightly judgmental in their design. A man hands you a hoe and gives the comforting advice, "Don't faint until noon." You laugh nervously. He doesn't. As you begin clearing weeds, the sun creeps up with all the subtlety of a pushy landlord. Sweat rolls down your back before you've cleared 5 feet of earth. The older woman working beside you doesn't even break a sweat, which makes you question your entire fitness level. You try to find a rhythm, swing, lift, step, breathe, but it quickly turns into swing, regret, step, question life choices. Still, there's a strange comfort to it. The repetitive scrape of metal on soil, the earthy smell, the sense that your labour feeds someone somewhere, even if it's not you. A couple of farmers joke about the rain. One claims he can smell storms weeks in advance. The other says he once sneezed and caused a drought. You appreciate the commitment to humour at 6 in the morning. Around mid-morning, you head back toward the village to help carry water. The well is surrounded by women who have already made 3 trips each. Their arms are strong enough to bend metal, and their expressions say, "Don't you dare comment on how heavy the jug looks." You wisely stay silent. You lift a brimming clay jug and instantly wobble like a baby giraffe. A group of women giggle, not unkindly, and one gives you advice on balancing it against your hip. You follow her instructions, and miraculously, you don't spill half the water on your feet. As you walk, you pass craftsmen starting their day, a blacksmith stoking his forge, a potter kneading clay, a tailor sorting thread with careful hands. Each one is already focused, already sweating, already invested in work that requires patience. You are definitely still developing. A quirky tidbit for you. Some Ottoman coffee houses had signs reminding patrons not to linger too long during work hours, meaning even leisure spaces had a built-in guilt system. Imagine sipping a cup of coffee while a wooden plaque stares at you like, "Hey, shouldn't you be doing something?" You reach the bakery next. Bread is life here, so the bakers work relentlessly, kneading, shaping, sliding rounds into a roaring oven. The air smells incredible, which feels rude considering how tired you already are. You ask for a small loaf, and the baker hands it over with the resigned expression of someone who hasn't slept since last autumn. As the day grows hotter, you shadow a carpenter repairing a roof beam. You hold the ladder while he climbs. The ladder creaks under his weight in a way that says, "I'm doing my best, but please don't breathe too hard." You grip tighter. He hammers away, sweat dripping from his chin, muttering about windstorms, termites, and the cosmic unfairness of wood warping at inconvenient times. You ask him if he ever rests. He laughs, loud, long, slightly hysterical. It answers your question. Later, near the river, a group of washerwomen slap wet clothing against flat stones with alarming force. You consider helping, but after watching a shirt fly 20 feet from the sheer impact of the hit, you decide you're emotionally unprepared for this level of upper body commitment. You wander toward the olive groves next, where labourers harvest late-season fruit by shaking trees and catching olives in wide nets. They move quickly, efficiently, joking with each other between shakes. One calls out to you, "Careful. If an olive hits you, it counts as a day's wages." You can't tell if he's joking. You step back anyway. And then, finally, noon. The sun hangs overhead like a giant judgmental eye. Work slows. People gather beneath whatever shade they can find. Fig trees, low roofs, wagon frames. Lunch is simple. Bread, olives, maybe a few dates. Someone shares a piece of cheese so salty it could preserve your soul. You eat gratefully. You think this is the break, but no. After a short rest, everyone stands and returns to their tasks. You trail along, feeling the weight of exhaustion settle in your bones like a second skeleton. In the afternoon, you help a shepherd mend fences. It's slow work, tying rope, hammering stakes, shoeing goats who are far too curious about your ankles. One goat follows you everywhere and bleats loudly whenever you take too long to complete a task. You consider this unfair performance evaluation. This gives you the perfect opening for your scholarly debate requirement. Historians still argue whether Ottoman labour demands were harsher than in neighbouring empires or simply better documented. You're convinced the answer is both, but right now you're too tired to argue about it. By sunset, your arms ache, your feet blister, and you smell like someone who lost a fight with a barn. Villagers gather for the evening meal, lentils again, flatbread again, but this time with herbs. The conversation drifts around you. Weather, taxes, rumours, small joys and shared fatigue. A father gently scolds his son for skipping chores. A grandmother weaves a basket while telling a story about a fox who worked harder than a farmer. The whole family laughs. The fox, you decide, sounds overworked too. When the sky darkens, lamps flicker to life. People wind down, slowly, reluctantly, because when rest is rare, you savour every minute. Kids doze against their parents, elders sip warm broth. Someone nearby snores softly, part of a peaceful chorus of exhaustion. You return to your sleeping mat, your muscles trembling from the day. But as you lie down, a surprising warmth spreads through you. Not comfort exactly, but connection. You worked, sweated, struggled, and shared the burden with everyone around you. In this empire, rest may be short, but resilience is long, and as your eyes drift shut, you feel it. The quiet pride of surviving another day in a world that asks so much and gives so little, yet somehow still feels worth enduring. Night fades, and with it slips away the thin illusion that yesterday's work somehow brought you rest. You rise slowly, aching shoulders, stiff legs, sandpaper eyelids, and step into the cool morning air. The sky is soft and blue, peaceful in a way your life absolutely refuses to be. Today, you're not heading to the fields or the forge. Today, you're about to witness the hidden world that half the empire depends on, and the other half pretends not to see. The lives of women whose work, strain, and quiet brilliance hold everything together even when nobody acknowledges it. You wander through the village as smoke curls from morning fires. Men pass by carrying tools. Boys chase chickens with the misguided confidence of youth. But the real activity, the beating heart of daily life, is unfolding behind doorways, in courtyards, and around wells. You make your way toward a cluster of homes. Curtains flutter. Wooden gates creak. A group of women gathers near the communal oven, their arms already dusted with flour. One kneads dough with the force and precision of someone who absolutely will not tolerate underwhelming bread. Another tenders the fire, sweat already glistening on her brow. This is the rhythm of their lives, constant motion, constant labour, constant emotional multitasking. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Women in the Ottoman Empire carried enormous responsibilities, raising children, managing households, preparing food, maintaining clothing, collecting water, arranging marriages, tending animals, and navigating legal rights that varied drastically based on religion, class, and region. They worked as midwives, bath attendants, market sellers, textile makers, and sometimes landowners, yet much of their labour went unrecorded. You watch as a young mother rocks a baby in one arm while stoking the oven with the other. The baby wails, the fire crackles, she doesn't flinch. Her calm is the kind forged from necessity. She glances at you as if to say, "You look tired? That's adorable." Nearby, two teenage girls carry heavy buckets from the well. They walk with practiced grace, hips balanced, spines straight, because one wrong step means spilling half the water and having to start over. You try carrying a bucket yourself. Halfway down the path, your arm gives out, your walk wobbles, and you almost baptize your sandals. The girls laugh, politely, but with the joy of witnessing relatable failure. You follow the path into a small courtyard where an older woman sits weaving cloth on a wooden loom. Her fingers fly like a magician's. The fabric grows inch by inch, a testament to patience you will never possess. She explains that this cloth will become headscarves and shirts for winter. You nod, trying not to think about how long it would take you to make even one sleeve. Your attention shifts to a group of women husking grain, their movements rhythmic and synchronized. They talk while they work, sharing stories, frustrations, gossip. Someone mentions her mother-in-law visiting soon, prompting a round of sympathetic groans. Someone else jokes that husbands should be taxed based on how often they lose their own tools. You laugh so hard you nearly drop the handful of grain you're pretending to help with. A quirky tidbit surfaces. In some Ottoman households, women made their own. Cosmetics from crushed flowers, charcoal and ground mineral powders. Rosewater, almond oil, and even saffron could become beauty tools. You picture yourself applying homemade eyeliner in a dim room, with a shard of polished metal as a mirror, and think, no wonder everyone's brows look dramatically intimidating. As the morning stretches, the unseen burdens grow visible. One woman steps aside to soothe a crying toddler. Another negotiates with a neighbour about borrowing thread. A third tries to convince a stubborn goat to stop escaping the pen, a negotiation she's clearly losing. The goat bleats triumphantly. You respect its confidence, and yet despite the hardships, the women maintain a world within their world. They form networks stronger than rope, advice passed down, recipes shared, grief carried collectively. They navigate social norms with strategic subtlety, balancing expectations with personal strength. You overhear two women discussing a court matter, a property dispute involving a widow. This opens your path to today's scholarly debate requirement. Historians still argue whether Ottoman women had more legal agency compared to their European contemporaries. Court documents show women filing lawsuits, owning property, and managing estates. But how widespread or practical those rights were in daily life remains debated. You walk with one woman to the edge of the village where laundry hangs between olive trees. She scrubs cloth on a washing stone, her hands red from cold water. She tells you her brother is away in the army, her husband travelling as a merchant, and her children endlessly growing out of their clothes. She doesn't complain, she simply states facts the way someone states the weather. It is what it is, and she will handle it. You help hang wet sheets and immediately experience the wrath of a gust of wind that tries to slap you in the face with the linen. The women snicker behind you. You bow at the sheet as though acknowledging its victory. In another yard, a grandmother tends to herbs drying in the sun, sage, mint, thyme. She crushes a handful between her palms and tells you they're for tea, medicine, and calming stubborn husbands. You decide not to ask for specifics. By early afternoon, you join a group preparing food for dinner. Slicing onions brings tears to your eyes. The women tease you gently, offering advice. Inhale through your mouth, don't get attached emotionally, or chew mint leaves while cutting. You try the mint trick. It helps, but now you smell like a confused salad. Children swarm around the cooking pots, begging for tastes. Mothers shoo them away with wooden spoons. You notice the quiet choreography, watching the little ones stirring pots, sharing news, disciplining gently yet firmly. The attention required is non-stop. As the sun dips lower, the courtyard begins transforming into an evening gathering space. Women string lanterns, lay woven rugs, and prepare dishes. Lentils with garlic, roasted eggplant, and warm flatbread that smells like comfort itself. You sit with them, sharing the meal. Laughter rises. Stories float through the air. Exhaustion lingers, but so does the warmth of community. A girl dances clumsily to a tune hummed by her aunt. Everyone claps. The goat returns, chewing on a rug corner. Everyone groans. Life continues. As night deepens, the women finally rest. But even then, rest is relative. A mother rocks a fussy baby. An elder massages her aching hands. Someone mends a tear in a shirt by lamplight, because tomorrow will require that shirt, and the day after will require another. You sit quietly, absorbing the weight and wonder of it all. Unseen labour, uncelebrated strength, endurance woven through every gesture. This world relies on women more than anyone admits, and you feel humbled to witness even one day of their invisible empire. You exhale softly, letting the lantern glow settle over you like warmth. Tomorrow, the cycle begins again, but tonight, for a moment, the world is gentle. You rise to the soft clatter of carts and hooves, not from your village this time, but from a nearby town where the streets pulse with life from dawn until the lamps flicker out. Today, you're going to experience something subtle but powerful. the deep divide between the noise-packed churn of Ottoman city life and the eerily quiet, slow-motion challenges of the countryside. You set out along a dusty road just as the sky blushes orange. Birds scatter. A donkey brays behind you like it disapproves of your posture. You ignore the commentary and continue walking toward the city ahead. A cluster of stone buildings, minarets cutting the sky, and the unmistakable hum of people who wake up already negotiating for something. As you approach the gates, the world shifts. The quiet fields fall behind, replaced by clangs, shouts, sizzling skillets, and arguments that sound like they've been going on for decades. A man pushes past with a tray of sesame rings. A porter hauls an enormous sack like it's filled with feathers instead of misery. A woman bargaining for olive oil gestures so passionately you fear someone will lose an eye. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Ottoman cities, especially major ones like Istanbul, Bursa and Damascus, were bustling centres of trade, governance, religion and culture, drawing people from across the empire into dense, vibrant, and often overwhelming urban environments. You slip through the market district, immediately engulfed in the smell of grilled meat, spices, fresh herbs, and occasionally something that smells like a shoe that's been morally compromised. Vendors shout prices. Cats stare at you with ancient disdain. A boy nearly collides with you, carrying a tray of tea so expertly balanced it might be magic. As you make your way deeper into the bazaar, the air thickens with heat and human intensity. You overhear 3 unrelated arguments happening at once. One merchant insists his silk came from Persia, not the imitation stuff the shop next door sells. A butcher claims his lambs lived happier lives than anyone else's lambs. A customer haggles so aggressively he might be negotiating peace terms rather than the price of lentils. And all of this is happening while you attempt to walk in a straight line without stepping on a cattail or getting bumped by someone wielding a fish. A quirky tidbit catches your memory as you watch the chaos. Many Ottoman cities employed town criers who walked through neighbourhoods announcing news, missing items, deaths, weddings, or lost animals. Some were famous for their dramatic flair. Imagine having your grocery list shouted theatrically across town because someone found your missing goat. You stop at a fountain to splash water on your face. The refreshment lasts 2 seconds before the air sticks to your skin again. But here in the city, things move quickly. You feel alive, aware, alert, maybe too alert. A man bumps your shoulder and mutters an apology. Another brushes past so fast you feel his sleeve on your arm. Tight spaces, sharp corners, quick movements. Everything presses around you like you're inside a crowded oven where everyone has strong opinions about bread. Then, just as your senses threaten to overload, you step out of the city and onto a quieter road that leads back toward the countryside, and the shift is so dramatic it feels like someone muted the world. Suddenly it's just space, open fields, long stretches of silence, the kind of silence that makes you aware of your own heartbeat. A donkey grazes lazily nearby. A woman hangs laundry in a yard. An old man smokes under a fig tree, staring into the distance like he's waiting for enlightenment or rain, whichever arrives first. Rural life moves differently, slower, steadier, quieter, but not easier. You walk past a farm where the family works together in weary unison. Children gathering sticks, women pulling weeds, men repairing a fence. No bustling crowds, no noise, just relentless, repetitive effort. This is where your scholarly debate requirement comes in. Historians still argue whether rural life in the Ottoman Empire was harsher than city life or simply hard in a different key. Cities had disease, crowding, crime, and higher taxes. Villages had isolation, food insecurity, and backbreaking labour. Neither was paradise. Both demanded constant endurance. A shepherd waves as you pass. He asks if you've come from the city. You nod. He snorts ambiguously. It could mean, city people are chaotic, or did you bring me baklava? Hard to tell. You join him at a stone fence, watching his sheep graze. He explains that in the countryside you plan your life by seasons. Planting, harvesting, pruning, herding, waiting, hoping. In the city, people plan their lives by bells and calls. Prayers, markets, meetings, laws. Both are rhythms, both are exhausting. As he talks, a sheep wanders too far. The shepherd shouts at it with the tone of someone who has absolutely had enough of sheep for one lifetime. You offer to help. The sheep ignores both of you, a classic moment of Ottoman rural disrespect. Walking again, You come across a narrow village street where a group of women sit outside embroidering cloth. They greet you softly. Their sewing is delicate, contrasting with the rugged landscape around them. Children chase each other barefoot, giggling, their feet kicking dust into golden swirls. Life here is gentler in sound, but heavier in responsibility. If a tool breaks, you fix it. If a goat wanders off, you find it. If the harvest fails, you tighten your belt. Nobody is selling silk. No one is shouting about lentil prices. But hunger, storms, wolves... Those arguments hit harder than anything in a bazaar. Evening approaches. You hear a muezzin's call drifting from the city behind you, a distant echo. Here in the countryside, the sound is softer, almost tender. Smoke rises from chimneys. A woman calls her children inside. A man ties his horse to a post. A dog curls by a doorway, sighing as if it's been working all day too. You settle onto a low stone wall, watching the faint lanterns of the city glitter on the horizon. Behind you is quiet. Before you is noise. You sit right in the middle, between two worlds that exist in the same empire but feel like different planets. City life crowds you. Village life stretches you thin. Both challenge you. Both shape you. And as night folds over the land, you realize a truth the empire never states outright. Hardship isn't louder in the city or quieter in the countryside. It just wears different clothes. You breathe deeply, letting the two worlds mingle in your memory. The clang and chaos behind you. The hush and dust before you. Tomorrow you'll step into another part of this vast, uneasy empire. But tonight, you let the contrast settle in your bones like the cool night air. You rise the next morning to the unmistakable clang of a hammer against metal. Sharp, rhythmic, insistent. Not the gentle wake-up call of a rooster, nor the rude shout of a donkey, but the industrial heartbeat of the Ottoman city, the guilds. Today you're stepping into the world of merchants, artisans, and gatekeepers, people whose hands shape the empire's daily life, while also keeping a very tight grip on who gets to join their club. You follow the noise through winding alleys until you emerge into a bustling craft district. The air hits you in layers: iron, sawdust, dye, soap, leather, spices, smoke, sweat. It's a whole sensory buffet, and your nose is absolutely overwhelmed. Men and women weave through the crowd carrying baskets, ropes, tools, cloth bundles, and at least 3 chickens who did not agree to this journey. You pass under a wooden archway carved with symbols, hammers, looms, scissors, marking the entrance to the guild street. Each guild has its own territory, its own signs, and its own unwritten rules that everyone except you seems to instinctively understand. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Ottoman guilds, known as esnaf, played a crucial role in regulating production, training apprentices, setting prices, maintaining quality, and supporting their members with loans or protection. They weren't just workplaces. They were social and economic institutions, and entering one wasn't as simple as smiling and shaking hands. You watch a group of apprentices sweeping the street outside their master's shop. They move so fast you wonder if the broom handles are extensions of their arms. A stern-looking man, a master craftsman, stands nearby with his arms crossed, observing them with the intense focus of someone who would absolutely notice if a single speck of dust survived the sweep. You greet him. He grunts, encouraging. You peek inside his shop. Metal tools line the walls. Blades in various states of creation lie on workbenches. Sparks fly as a blacksmith pounds glowing iron. The heat slaps you in the face, and you take a truly heroic half-step closer before retreating for your own survival. A boy, maybe 12, shapes a piece of metal under the watchful eye of his master. His hands shake. The master gives a correction so subtle you barely catch it. The boy nods, breathes, tries again. Progress is slow but steady. A merchant nearby calls to you energetically, waving a bolt of fabric dyed such a vibrant red it looks like it crawled out of a sunset. Quality unmatched, he declares. Perfect for clothing, curtains, wrapping gifts, bribing officials, whatever you need. You choke on a laugh. You browse the stalls as merchants show off copper pots, embroidered scarves, carved spoons, soap scented with lavender, and combs carved from bone. Each item reflects hours of labour, years of training, and generations of knowledge passed like heirlooms. A quirky tidbit emerges from your memory. Some guilds held elaborate initiation ceremonies for apprentices completing their training. These could involve feasts, humorous pranks, symbolic gifts, and occasionally public demonstrations of skill. Imagine graduating from your trade school with an official sash, a new hammer, and someone pieing you with celebratory yogurt. As you walk deeper into the district, you notice how structured everything is. Butchers work in one lane, tailors in another, bakers in another still. It's like a giant living filing system, except instead of folders, you have humans with knives, needles, and hot ovens. A tailor pulls you into his shop before you can object. He measures your shoulders with a cord, frowns dramatically, and mutters, one shoulder slightly higher. Happens when you carry too many worries. You decide that is both accurate and none of his business. He shows you fabrics: cotton, wool, silk. He explains prices, quality, and patterns with the enthusiasm of someone who dreams in stitch counts. You nod politely, realizing quickly that you can't afford even the scraps on the floor. Moving on, you encounter a crowd gathered around a guild meeting. Masters sit on cushions, apprentices kneel nearby, and one particularly passionate speaker is arguing that the price of soap should be raised because too many people stink and we deserve compensation. You admire the energy. This brings you smoothly to your scholarly debate requirement. Historians still argue whether Ottoman guilds protected workers from exploitation or restricted upward mobility by creating rigid hierarchies and limiting competition. From the way the crowd looks, half hopeful, half trapped, you suspect both interpretations hold truth. You wander into the spice street next. Colours explode before your eyes: saffron yellow, paprika red, mint green, midnight black peppercorns. The scent hits you like a warm blanket that may or may not make you sneeze. A spice seller grins at you and shakes a jar under your nose. You inhale deeply. You regret everything. He laughs. Too strong for you, he declares. You agree wholeheartedly while your sinuses file complaints. You move toward the coffeehouse district. Guild members gather here to rest, argue, gossip, and occasionally threaten to unionize before changing their minds. The coffeehouse hums with debate today. At one table, two merchants argue about whether silk prices will rise. At another, a group of bakers loudly accuse each other of stealing recipes. One man insists he invented a special sesame topping. No one believes him. A young apprentice sits alone, sipping coffee much too strong for his small frame. He tells you he dreams of becoming a master craftsman, owning his own shop, maybe even joining the guild council one day. But he also confesses the path is long. Years of training, passing examinations, proving loyalty, earning trust, and learning not to burn down the workshop. He says this quietly. You do not ask follow-up questions. You leave the bustle behind and head toward the storage district. Workers unload sacks of grain, crates of fruit, bales of wool. Everything is heavy, everything is necessary, everything is work. A man hauling a sack twice his weight jokes. If the Sultan ever needs lifting, call me. You laugh, and then he actually lifts his sack higher, proving his point. Further along, you witness a dispute between two guild members. One accuses the other of selling inferior fabrics. The other swears the dye variation is artistic choice. A guild official steps in, scribbling notes, inspecting cloth, asking questions. After a tense moment, he announces his ruling. The crowd murmurs approval. The system works, most of the time. Evening approaches, shops shutter, lamps glow, guild members gather for dinner, simple meals eaten together. Bread, olives, lentil stew, laughter. Apprentices slump in exhaustion. Masters recount old stories. Merchants compare profits. Someone snores after 2 bites of food. You sit among them, sharing warm bread passed your way. The camaraderie feels genuine, even if the system behind it is strict. As darkness settles, you step onto the quiet street. The clang of hammers fades. The smell of dye lifts. The market shutters. The guilds rest. But tomorrow they'll rise again. Same crafts, same debates, same ambitions, same gatekeeping, same steady heartbeat of the empire. And you walk away knowing this truth. In the Ottoman world, work doesn't just fill the day. Work defines who you are allowed to become. You don't even make it 5 steps into the next morning before you hear it. Someone muttering under their breath with the exact tone that says, "This empire would run so much smoother if everyone just did what they were supposed to, including the people in charge." You don't know what the problem is yet, but the vibe is unmistakable. Today, you're entering the shadowy corners of Ottoman daily life. the spaces where bribery, favours and whispered deals oil the creaky machinery of the empire. And honestly, you can practically smell the corruption before you even reach town. As you enter the next settlement, you notice something immediately. People aren't walking with the usual weary rhythm. They're moving carefully, glancing around, lowering their voices. When villagers behave like they're avoiding invisible tripwires, you know something bureaucratic is happening. A man waves you over to a stall selling figs, apricots, and some fruit that looks like it's contemplating early retirement. "Big day," he says. "The district administrator is visiting." You raise an eyebrow. He leans closer. "Bring your best smile, and maybe a coin or two." "Ah, that kind of day." You move toward the square where the administrator, dressed in rich fabrics and boots suspiciously clean for rural travel, stands surrounded by assistants. His expression is a blend of boredom and mild annoyance, like he expected this village to be prettier, wealthier, or less dusty. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Corruption existed across the Ottoman administrative system, from small-town officials collecting extra fees to powerful administrators accepting bribes to overlook taxes, grant permissions, or provide privileges. These practices weren't always legal, but they were normalized. The administrator inspects documents, nods sharply, and occasionally scolds a villager for missing paperwork. But you quickly notice a pattern. After the scolding comes a quiet conversation. After the quiet conversation comes a discreet payment. After the discreet payment comes forgiveness. You watch the cycle repeat like it's part of the natural world. Sunrise, sunset, and the universal dance of please overlook this tiny issue for a tiny fee. A shepherd ahead of you is visibly sweating. He explains that he lost a sheep last month to wolves and can't pay the full tax on his flock. The administrator frowns in theatrical disappointment. A coin discreetly changes hands. The administrator suddenly understands how tragic wolf attacks are. Paperwork is adjusted. The shepherd walks away, relieved but poorer. You sigh. It's both predictable and maddening. As you wander on, you see villagers waiting in a line to receive travel documents. Some walk away with stamped papers. Others walk away confused, muttering that they must return tomorrow for unspecified reasons. You look closely. It seems everyone who walked away successful had money in their hand when they approached the desk. A quirky tidbit leaps into your memory. Some Ottoman officials were infamous for charging speed fees, small bribes that guaranteed faster processing. In some regions, it became so expected that people joked, "Bring 2 purses to the office, one for documents, one for happiness." You turn a corner and stumble upon a heated conversation between 2 merchants. One is furious that his competitor gained permission to sell imported cloth while he was denied. You listen long enough to realize the truth. The competitor slipped a coin purse to the official's assistant. Permissions apparently work on a first bribe, first served basis. Nearby, a young woman tries to obtain a property record. The official barely glances at her papers before telling her to come back next week. But when an older, wealthier man approaches, he gets full attention and even help filling out the form. You grit your teeth quietly. This brings you to your scholarly debate requirement. Historians still argue whether Ottoman corruption significantly weakened the empire or simply functioned as an informal network that helped things get done when the formal system was too slow. Some say it undermined justice. Others say it kept local administration flexible. You say it mostly made everyone tired. You keep walking and eventually find a quieter alley, where scribes sit copying documents. Their hands are smudged with ink. Their faces look like they haven't slept well since the last sultan's coronation. One scribe confesses, "Look, I'm paid very little. If someone offers 2 coins to move their petition up the stack, well..." He gestures toward a towering pile of parchment. "Wouldn't you?" You don't answer. You're not morally prepared to judge someone who earns less than a goat. Moving back toward the market, you notice how corruption shapes even simple interactions. A fisherman brags that he avoids inspections by bringing fresh sardines to the guard at the river crossing. A baker explains that if he doesn't gift 3 loaves a week to the tax clerk, the clerk suddenly remembers new levies he forgot to mention earlier. You shake your head and wander into the coffeehouse district. Inside, merchants, porters and craftsmen share stories like a support group for the bureaucratically traumatized. One man swears an official demanded a bribe to stop investigating a problem he didn't have. Another claims he bribed a man to not lose his own documents. Someone else mutters that the palace in Istanbul has no idea what villagers actually go through. The room hums with collective exasperation. You sip a cup of strong coffee, so strong it might qualify as a stimulant for your soul. It's bitter, but you need the energy. As you drink, a man at the next table tells a wild story about a corrupt official who was so blatant with bribes that the villagers banded together and sent a petition straight to the Sultan. The official was removed, and for 2 glorious months, no one had to pay extra for anything. Then a new official arrived. You already know how that story ends. Later, on your walk toward the river, you encounter a bridge where toll collectors sit with wooden boxes. One demands a crossing fee from a group of farmers, but waves a wealthy trader through for free because he claims the trader brings honor to the region. The farmers glare. The trader smirks. You step aside and breathe slowly. By evening, corruption fades back into the cracks of daily life. But you still feel its fingerprints everywhere. In the careful voices of villagers discussing taxes, in the cautious way merchants glance at officials, in the tired posture of scribes, and in the resigned sighs of anyone who has ever needed anything from someone with power. You sit on a low stone wall as the sun dips behind the hills, painting the sky in muted gold. Children chase each other in the square. A woman carries bread home for dinner. A man sweeps dust from his doorstep. Everything looks gentle and simple, peaceful even. But beneath that peace lies a quiet truth. In the Ottoman Empire, survival isn't just about hard work or good weather. It's about navigating a maze of favors, fees, negotiations, and the subtle art of staying on every official's good side. You exhale slowly, feeling that truth settle into your bones. Tomorrow you'll face new challenges, but tonight you rest. Knowing the Empire's gears may be rusty, but somehow they keep turning. You wake to the steady shuffle of feet outside, soft, deliberate, the kind of footwork people use when they don't want to draw attention. It's the sound of caution, of whispered business, of villagers walking like the air itself is listening. Today, you're stepping into another layer of Ottoman life, the legal world. Or more accurately, the legal maze, a system where justice exists, yes, but so do paperwork, personalities, rumours, grudges, favours, and enough bureaucratic improvisation to make your head spin. You step into the morning light and follow the flow of people toward the town centre. The air feels crisp, but there's tension underneath it, like a string pulled taut. As you approach, you see the small courthouse, a simple structure with wooden beams, thick stone walls, and a doorway worn smooth by decades of anxious hands passing through it. Inside stands the qadi, the judge, cloaked, composed, eyes sharp enough to cut through excuses like a knife through warm bread. He oversees legal matters ranging from land disputes to inheritance, crimes, marriages, divorces, and business conflicts. He is respected, feared, admired, and complained about constantly, sometimes all in the same hour. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Ottoman courts were rooted in Islamic law, Sharia, supplemented by local customs, urf, imperial decrees, and various administrative practices. Cases were recorded meticulously in court registers, sicils, which today give historians detailed insights into daily life. But standing in the courtroom now, you see what the books never fully capture: the emotions, the nerves, the politics woven into every testimony. A farmer steps forward to contest a boundary marker between his field and his neighbour's. The neighbour counters. The judge listens silently, expression unreadable. Witnesses argue. Measuring rods come out. People gather around, offering unsolicited opinions. Someone in the back whispers, "This again?" You feel the tension rolling through the crowd like a slow wave. The judge finally makes his ruling, carefully, firmly, and both farmers bow, though one of them definitely looks like he wants to bite someone. Case closed. You step aside just as 2 women approach, discussing an inheritance issue. One is a young widow, the other an aunt claiming guardianship rights. Their voices tremble, not with anger, but the weight of consequences. In this world, a court decision can determine a woman's security for years. A group of scribes sits nearby recording everything in looping script. Their hands fly across the pages with mechanical precision, though their eyes burn with the exhaustion of men who have spent their entire lives writing down other people's problems. You wander outside for air only to find more drama unfolding in the courtyard. A merchant is arguing with a caravan leader about a missing shipment of dates. The merchant insists the dates were stolen. The leader insists they were never received. A boy listening nearby insists he literally saw some kids eating dates behind the stable last night. Everyone ignores him. You sit on a stone bench, taking in the scene. The courthouse isn't just a place of justice. It's a theatre of human contradictions, truth and lies, dignity and desperation, courage and cowardice, all tangled together in one dusty square. A quirky tidbit floats into your mind. Some Ottoman villages used to settle disputes by bringing both parties to drink sherbet in front of the community. Whoever refused was assumed guilty. You imagine showing up for a serious conflict and someone handing you a sweet drink as the test of your honesty. Weirdly effective. Back inside, you witness a very different case. A man accused of stealing chickens. The chickens in question cluck loudly in a cage as evidence, as if personally offended by the entire ordeal. The accused insists they wandered into his yard seeking spiritual refuge. You raise an eyebrow. The judge does too. Witnesses argue over whose chickens these truly are. Apparently Ottoman chickens belong to whichever household fed them most consistently. After several minutes of heated testimony, a child blurts out that the chickens have names and always go home to the same barn. Case dismissed. The chickens win. As comedic as it is, this leads you neatly to your scholarly debate requirement. Historians still argue whether Ottoman law was unusually flexible and pragmatic, or whether that flexibility created inconsistencies and uneven justice. Some praise the responsiveness of Cadiz. Others criticize the variability between regions. You realize the answer is complicated, like everything else in this empire. Walking outside again, you see a small crowd forming near the fountain. A travelling storyteller is recounting a famous legal legend. A judge who ruled so brilliantly that even the accused thanked him. You smile. Stories always polish real life until it shines a little brighter. But people need that comfort. A man next to you leans in and whispers conspiratorially, "Justice depends on the judge's mood." You glance inside the courthouse, where the judge sips tea with exaggerated calm. You decide not to test that theory today. You wander toward the document office next door. Here, villagers line up for deeds, permissions, petitions, and marriage paperwork. A clerk looks overworked, surrounded by stacks of parchment that could double as a fortress. He waves people forward with a mechanical hand, stamping, writing, muttering, sighing. At one point he stands, cracks his back, and says, "Next," in a tone that suggests he hasn't enjoyed the word next in 20 years. As you watch, a couple approaches to register their marriage contract. Their families stand behind them, one side smiling, the other side deeply suspicious, as if the marriage is a contested military treaty. The clerk reads the contract aloud. Everyone nods, then someone interrupts to argue about the dowry amount. This continues for 10 minutes. You contemplate lying down on the floor. Next in line is a man requesting travel documents for a business trip. The clerk asks for his name, his village, his purpose, and, unofficially, whether he brought a token of appreciation. The man produces a small jar of honey. The clerk brightens considerably. Back in the square, two townspeople discuss a rumour about a judge in a neighbouring district who accepted a donkey as payment for a favourable ruling. The first man insists the story is true. The second says the donkey was actually a horse. The third, a baker passing by, says everyone is wrong and it was goat-related. You decide this argument has no clean resolution. Later in the day, you watch a group of villagers sitting under a tree, discussing their disputes before bringing them to court. "Better to solve problems ourselves," says one. "Better to avoid paperwork," says another. "Better to avoid the judge's glare," adds a third. You nod silently, they're right on all counts. As evening settles over the town, the courthouse closes its doors. The crowd disperses. Chickens return to their coop. Scribes stretch their cramped hands. The judge walks home with the solemn dignity of a man who has heard far too many excuses today. You sit alone on a low stone bench, letting the quiet return. Law here isn't just rules. It's negotiation, personality, culture, superstition, bureaucracy, community pressure, and the eternal search for fairness in a world that rarely provides it neatly. You breathe in the cool night air, realizing something subtle but important. In the Ottoman Empire, justice is not a straight line. It's a winding path, shaped by the people who walk it. And tomorrow, you'll take the next step on that twisting road. You wake before dawn to a sound you haven't heard since your earliest days wandering this empire. The deep, distant rumble of something heavy moving across the land. Not thunder, not carts, not the restless shifting of livestock. Something heavier, more deliberate, more organized. And as the sky begins to pale, you realize exactly what it is. An army on the move. Your stomach tightens. War is approaching. Or, just as unsettling, war is passing through. In the Ottoman Empire, when armies travel, the land itself trembles, and the people living on that land brace themselves, whether they want to or not. You step outside. A cold wind carries dust down the road. Birds scatter. Dogs bark nervously. Villagers emerge from their homes with wary eyes. You join them at the edge of the settlement, watching as the first armoured silhouettes appear. Janissaries, cavalry, baggage caravans, cooks, blacksmiths, medics, scribes, and those unofficial followers who always trail armies, traders, fortune-tellers, troublemakers, hopefuls, and the curious. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Ottoman Empire spent centuries engaged in military campaigns, expanding, defending, suppressing rebellions, and maintaining control over vast territories. These campaigns were enormous logistical undertakings, often requiring food, lodging, supplies, and labour from local populations, which means, unfortunately for you and this little village, the army needs things you probably can't afford to give. A commander rides at the front, stern face, pristine beard, eyes scanning the village like he's deciding how much trouble it will be. Behind him march rows of soldiers, boots pounding in practiced rhythm. Their armour glints even in the faint morning light. Their expressions are unreadable, focused, but there's something in their eyes. Fatigue, determination, maybe resignation. Armies may look imposing, but soldiers carry their own hardships. Villagers begin whispering, "They'll take grain. They'll take horses. They'll take our sons. No, this isn't conscription season." Does war have a season? A donkey brays loudly, which feels rude under the circumstances. The soldiers stop in the square, officers dismount, messengers spread out. A scribe unrolls a long parchment and begins listing what the army requires. The list is not short. You wince as the village headman steps forward with the courage of someone who already regrets volunteering. Negotiations begin, polite at first, then increasingly desperate. The army wants more grain than the villagers stored, more firewood than can be chopped in a day, more carts than the villagers can spare. A young soldier walks past you, carrying a spear taller than he is. He glances your way, offering a tired half-smile, just enough humanity to crack the tension. You smile back, quietly grateful that exhaustion softens even military edges. Nearby, children watch wide-eyed as the cavalry horses drink from buckets. A little girl slowly inches forward to touch a shiny stirrup before her mother swoops in and drags her back. Horses, unlike soldiers, don't understand civilian boundaries. A quirky tidbit springs to mind. Some Ottoman military camps were so large that travellers described them as moving cities, complete with temporary markets, makeshift bakeries, bath tents, and entertainers. Imagine sleeping in your field one night and waking up to find 40,000 new neighbours who all want snacks. You glance at the encampment forming near the outskirts, tents rising like mushrooms after rain, fires lit, cooking pots hung over flames, soldiers setting up rows of equipment. It's organised chaos, with everyone knowing exactly what to do except you. As the day unfolds, the village shifts into a strained partnership with the passing army. Men lead oxen and carts to deliver grain. Women carry baskets of bread and cheese to the soldiers. The blacksmith works non-stop repairing horseshoes and spearheads. Even children run errands, delivering messages or carrying water to thirsty soldiers. But beneath this, cooperation is fear. Fear that giving too little will anger the officers. Fear that giving too much will starve the village. Fear that war will return, harsher next time. And this leads directly to your scholarly debate requirement. Historians still argue whether Ottoman military campaigns strengthened the empire through discipline and organisation, or weakened it by draining local economies, disrupting agriculture, and exhausting rural populations. Standing here now, watching villagers empty their stores, you feel the truth. It's both. You sit on a low stone wall and watch a cook preparing a giant cauldron of stew for the soldiers. He chops onions with astonishing aggression. You approach and ask what it's like travelling with the army. He shrugs. Long days, long marches, long nights. The food's never enough. The pay's never on time, but someone has to feed these fools. He gestures at a soldier who is attempting to peel potatoes with the enthusiasm of a man peeling his own regrets. You nod sympathetically. At midday, a group of soldiers trains outside the village, practicing formations with shouts and stomps. Dust clouds rise around them in rhythmic bursts. Young men from the village watch with awe, whispering fantasies of adventure. Their mothers, standing behind them, whisper prayers of, "Please do not even think about it." A commotion breaks out near the supply wagons. 2 officers dispute how many chickens the village owes. The village headman insists they already delivered the agreed amount. The officer insists his superior specifically requested more. Voices rise. Hands gesture fiercely. A chicken escapes and runs across the square as if fleeing taxation. The absurdity gives the villagers a moment of laughter they desperately need. Toward evening, the soldiers begin packing up. Orders echo across the camp. Fires are doused, horses are saddled. The great moving city prepares to move again. You see relief in the villagers' faces, but also anxiety, because what's left behind is not just trampled grass and half-burned fire pits. The granaries are light, the oxen are exhausted, people have less than they started the day with. Before leaving, a young soldier approaches the village headman and quietly hands him a small pouch. Coins, spices, maybe dried fruit. You don't know, but the gesture is sincere. He murmurs something before running back to formation. Moments like that don't fix the damage, but they soften it. As the army marches out of sight, the village exhales in one long, shaky breath. People slowly return to their routines, quiet and tired, carrying both worry and relief. You stare down the empty road, feeling the weight of the Empire's military machine. Impressive, yes. Powerful, obviously, but also hungry. Hungry for resources, labor, time, and the strength of everyday people who don't get medals for endurance. The sun dips, the village grows still again, and you realize something fundamental. When war rolls through, everyone fights, soldiers with weapons, villagers with resilience. You head home, footsteps slow, knowing tomorrow you'll witness another corner of this empire where survival requires not just effort, but constant adaptation. You wake the next morning to the soft sound of something familiar, gentle chanting drifting through the air like a warm ribbon. It's the call to prayer rising from the village mosque, weaving between rooftops, slipping through windows, settling onto your shoulders with surprising calm. Today, you step into one of the most constant forces shaping Ottoman life: religion. Not as a distant institution, but as a daily rhythm, comforting, demanding, guiding, and occasionally complicating everything around you. You stretch and wander outside, blinking into the soft morning light. People are already moving, some heading toward the mosque, some laying out rugs in their courtyards, others starting work while murmuring a quiet prayer for strength, luck, or maybe just the patience to deal with their neighbors. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Islam was the dominant religion in the Ottoman Empire, shaping law, social customs, education and governance. But the empire was also home to millions of Christians and Jews, each with their own rituals and communities, creating a multi-layered spiritual landscape. As you walk down the street, you see traces of that diversity everywhere. A Muslim family washes before prayer at the fountain. Down another lane, a Greek Orthodox household lights incense in front of an icon. A Jewish merchant chants morning blessings beside his doorway. Faith is woven into the empire not as one thread, but many, overlapping, tangling, occasionally pulling tight. Today, though, you're drawn toward the mosque. It's a modest stone building with an old wooden door that squeaks dramatically every time someone enters, as if demanding to be part of the ritual. The courtyard is simple but peaceful. Men rinse hands and feet. Children scamper nearby, playing tag quietly until an elder gives them the universal grandparent glare of "not now." Inside, the air is cool. A young imam leads recitation. Calm voice, steady rhythm. You sit in the back, observing how prayer shapes the mood of the room. Shoulders loosen, brows unclench. Worries soften, even if briefly. It's not that hardship disappears. only that people borrow a moment of stillness before stepping back into the storm. After prayers, villagers gather outside, greeting each other, exchanging updates. You hear, "How's your mother feeling?" "The goats escaped again. The roof still leaks, but I patched it. I hope the grain prices drop before winter." Faith isn't just spiritual, it's social glue. As the crowd disperses, you walk through the market. A religious scholar stands beneath a fig tree explaining a passage from the Quran to a small circle of curious listeners. His words drift gently with the breeze. He pauses often, inviting questions. Some villagers ask about charity obligations, others ask about fairness in trade. He answers patiently, even when the questions veer into, "My cousin said this, but my aunt said that" territory. A quirky tidbit sparkles in your memory. Some Ottoman Sufi orders held musical ceremonies involving chanting, singing, even whirling dances meant to induce spiritual focus. You remember glimpsing one once. Dancers spinning so gracefully, they looked like moving calligraphy. Maybe later you'll see something like that again. Heading toward the outskirts, you pass a cemetery, where stones lean at soft angles like tired old men. A woman tends a grave, whispering prayers as she arranges fresh herbs. Another woman joins her, offering comfort without words. Grief flows quietly here, held gently by rituals older than anyone in the village. Further on you hear bells, not loud, soft, rhythmic, belonging to a tiny Christian chapel beside a cluster of stone homes. A priest stands outside, sweeping leaves. He greets you warmly, even though he clearly has no idea who you are. He invites a small group of villagers into the chapel. You decline politely but linger near the doorway long enough to hear singing, simple, steady, beautiful. And this, quietly, leads toward your scholarly debate requirement. Historians still argue whether the Ottoman millet system fostered genuine religious coexistence, or merely tolerated difference under strict hierarchy. The empire gave communities autonomy in many matters, but freedoms lived alongside inequalities. Walking through these streets, you feel both truths living side by side. Returning to the village centre, you pass a coffee house, where several men debate religious philosophy. Animated hands, furrowed brows, half-finished coffee cups. One insists fate controls everything. Another argues that effort matters more. A third just wants someone to refill his cup before it gets cold. It's a lively scene, punctuated by laughter, when an elderly man declares he's too old for arguments and just wants peace. You continue toward the women's quarter, where courtyards burst with daily rituals, prayers whispered while kneading bread, blessings murmured over sick children, vows spoken quietly before starting a difficult task. For many women, religion is both comfort and compass, a source of identity, routine, and resilience. A grandmother pulls you aside to show a small amulet hanging near her door, a woven charm meant to ward off misfortune. "Faith helps," she says, "but a little extra protection never hurts." You nod, considering how many of these charms you've seen throughout your travels. Beads, verses etched in wood, painted eyes, knots tied carefully into fabric. Everyone here mixes official religion with folk belief, practicality with hope. By afternoon, the village streets glow with sunlight. A Sufi dervish passes through, offering blessings in exchange for bread. Children gather around him, entranced by his soft chanting and the rhythmic tap of his staff. He smiles gently, reminding everyone to care for their neighbours. Later, a teacher gathers children beneath a mulberry tree for lessons. He teaches letters, arithmetic, and, occasionally, moral parables drawn from religious stories. You watch the children recite lines in unison, some enthusiastically, others with the defeated expression of students throughout all time. Afterward, one asks him whether angels get bored. He responds with, "Only when children ask too many questions." The other children laugh. As evening drapes the village, lanterns glow warm. Families sit together sharing food, stories, and blessings. A mother teaches her daughter a prayer for protection before sleep. A father tells his sons about saints and scholars. A group of neighbours sings quietly together, their voices blending into the warm night. You sit on a low step, watching how faith pulses through this place. Not loud or overwhelming, but steady. Not perfect, but persistent. It brings comfort and conflict, unity and difference, certainty and doubt. It shapes law, culture, patience, generosity, and sometimes arguments over who recited a verse incorrectly. and as the final call to prayer rises into the deepening sky, you feel something soften inside you. Not belief itself necessarily, but an understanding of why people cling to it. In an empire filled with uncertainty, faith, whatever form it takes, is a lantern carried through the dark. You breathe deeply, letting that lantern glow sink into your bones. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, but tonight, under the murmuring sky, you rest in the quiet warmth of shared hope. You wake to the creak of wagon wheels and the grumbling of travellers who have clearly been on the road far too long. Today, you're stepping into one of the realities most people in the Ottoman Empire rarely volunteered for but often had no choice about: travel. And let's get something out of the way right now. Travelling in this world is not a vacation. It's not even a pleasant stroll. It's more like agreeing to let the Empire slap you around with roads, weather, bandits and bureaucracy while you pretend you're making good time. You step onto the dusty path leading out of the village. It's barely dawn, but already the road is alive. Merchants wrapping bundles with rope, shepherds herding bleating animals, a caravan leader yelling at someone for forgetting to pack cooking pots, and one extremely disgruntled camel making noises that sound like it's suing the universe. The air feels cool, for now. You start walking beside a group of travellers headed toward a nearby town. They greet you with the exhausted politeness of people who have slept outdoors on lumpy ground and eaten nothing but dry bread for 2 days. Your first surprise? The road is not good. It's uneven, scattered with rocks, deeply rutted from wagon wheels, and occasionally disappears entirely, forcing everyone to stop, squint, point and say things like, "I swear the road was here last year." You trip twice within the first 10 minutes. A donkey watching you definitely judges your coordination. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Ottoman roads varied wildly in quality. Some major routes were maintained for military and trade purposes, but rural paths were often rugged, poorly marked, and vulnerable to flood damage. Travel times were long, unpredictable, and exhausting. A bridge comes into view, or what used to be a bridge. It's half collapsed, leaning dramatically like it's trying to exit the scene. A group of villagers has placed a plank across the gap. You cross it carefully, questioning everything you've ever believed about balance. A small child behind you hops over without hesitation. You pretend not to notice. Further along the road, you pass a caravanserai, one of the empire's roadside inns. A large stone structure with high walls, an inner courtyard and stalls for animals. It's a temporary refuge for travellers who need shelter from weather, thieves, or despair. Inside, the scene is chaotic but lively. Camels kneel in the courtyard like giant disgruntled Ottomans. Merchants haggle over fodder prices. A boy chases a chicken that absolutely refuses to accept capture. A tired guard slumps by the entrance half asleep, holding a spear like it's a comfortable pillow. You take a seat on a low bench beside a merchant who smells faintly of cinnamon and dust. He sighs deeply and tells you he's been on the road for 16 days. 16 days. You blink. He nods with the heavy eyes of someone seeing distant lands because he's walked. Across them, step by painful step. His wagon creaks ominously nearby. You glance at it. One wheel is held together by rope, prayer, and delusion. Yet somehow, he continues. A quirky tidbit pops into your memory. Some Ottoman travellers tied bells to their caravans, not just to prevent animals from wandering, but to ward off spirits believed to follow lonely roads. You see a few such bells jingling in the morning breeze, adding an oddly cheerful soundtrack to the dusty misery of travel. Leaving the caravanserai, you continue with a small group heading toward the next town. The road grows narrower, trees crowd closer, everyone quiets. You sense why. Bandits. Real ones. Not dramatic storybook bandits, but desperate men hiding in forests targeting travellers with goods worth stealing. A woman whispers that a bandit group was spotted nearby last month. A man beside her tightens his grip on a walking stick. The traveller in front of you casually pats the dagger at his belt. You try to look brave, which is difficult when you're mostly hoping bandits take one look at you and think, "No thanks, too tired." Eventually, you don't encounter any bandits, just squirrels, loud squirrels. But the fear alone ages you a year. You stop near a stream to rest. People refill water skins quickly, because Ottoman streams are not known for staying safe or clean. You drink anyway, praying your stomach cooperates. A shepherd laughs when he sees your face afterward. "First time drinking road water?" he asks. You nod. He pats your back like you've just graduated from something important. This sets you up perfectly for your scholarly debate requirement. Historians still argue whether Ottoman travel conditions were worse than those in Europe at the same time, or simply different in structure and purpose. Trade routes were extensive, yes, but maintenance varied. Security varied. Infrastructure varied. It was a system held together by habit and necessity more than comfort. Back on the road, afternoon heat hits like a thrown brick. Sweat drips down your neck. Dust clings to your clothes. Your ankles feel like they've signed up for a revolt. Every time you think you're close to the next town, someone says, "Just a little farther," which in travel language means 2 more hours of pain. But then, finally, rooftops appear in the distance. The group cheers softly, too tired for real enthusiasm. Entering the town, you immediately feel the shift. Travellers unload goods. Locals examine new wares. Someone sells drinks from a clay jug. A man with a trained monkey performs tricks. A scribe writes letters for people who cannot read or write. A woman sells warm bread. You buy some so fast you surprise yourself. And it hits you. The exhaustion of travel, the dust, the danger, it all melts a little when you finally arrive somewhere new. The destination is a reward, even if the journey nearly broke you. You sit under an olive tree watching the sunset paint the landscape. Gold. Travellers settle around you, eating, tending animals, telling stories, comparing blisters. Someone jokes that Ottoman roads have a personal vendetta against ankles. Everyone laughs because it's true. As night settles, lamps glow across the town. Dogs bark in the distance. Merchants arrange their goods for morning. Tired travellers drift into sleep. You lie back against your bundle, eyes half closed, feeling the day in every muscle. Travel here isn't glamorous, it isn't peaceful, it isn't predictable, but it is a thread binding the empire's farthest corners, carrying ideas, goods, stories, sorrows and hopes across landscapes shaped by both human effort and natural indifference. You sigh, letting the cool night breeze soften the heat from your skin. Tomorrow, you may walk again. But for now, you let rest claim you, and for once, the road releases its grip. You wake to the gentle clatter of wooden shutters and the murmured recitation of someone practicing letters nearby. At first, you think it's part of a dream, something soothing and rhythmic like waves on a shore. But when you sit up and stretch your back, which cracks loudly enough to qualify as percussion, you realize the truth. Today, the village school is open, and you're about to discover something rare in your Ottoman journey. Education, but only for the lucky few. You wander through narrow lanes toward a small courtyard shaded by a mulberry tree. Children sit cross-legged on woven mats, some wide-eyed with excitement, others staring blankly like they left their brains at home. A teacher, an elderly man with an impressive beard and an even more impressive sense of calm, stands at the front holding a wooden tablet coated in chalk dust. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Literacy rates in the Ottoman Empire were generally low, especially in rural areas. Education varied widely by class, region, gender and religion. Wealthy boys might attend madrises, religious schools, and study law, theology or mathematics. Many girls learned at home, if at all. Most peasants simply had too much work and too few resources to prioritize education. As you step into the courtyard, the teacher greets you with a nod. The children glance up, some whispering guesses about who you are. A traveller? A tax collector? A very confused merchant? You wave awkwardly. A girl waves back with heroic enthusiasm. The teacher begins the lesson by reciting the alphabet. The children echo his words, loud, soft, bored, dramatic. One boy shouts his letters with such gusto he nearly topples sideways. A little girl beside him gently nudges him upright without looking up from her tablet. You sit along the edge, watching the teacher draw graceful lines across the board. Ottoman script is fluid and beautiful, almost too beautiful for your tired brain to handle before breakfast. The children copy each stroke carefully. Some succeed, some create shapes of deep artistic mystery. A young boy proudly shows you his tablet. You smile, even though you're not entirely sure whether he wrote a letter or a very determined worm. He beams anyway. The teacher explains a short passage from a religious text. The older students follow along thoughtfully. The younger ones stare at a butterfly fluttering nearby, worshipping it with absolute devotion. Truly, some things never change. A quirky tidbit drifts into your mind. In some Ottoman schools, students sat in small pits dug into the floor to help them stay still, because apparently gravity was considered a useful teaching tool. You scan the ground here just to check. Thankfully, no academic pits today. After the recitation, the teacher quizzes the class. What is the measure of good character? What is the meaning of patience? What is the duty of a neighbour? Hands shoot up and answers flow. Some wise, some confused, some clearly stolen from older siblings. The teacher smiles through all of them, correcting gently. Then comes arithmetic. The teacher draws simple calculations. Some kids frown so intensely you fear for their eyebrows. A boy counts on his fingers, a girl counts on her toes. One particularly tired child counts on thin air, staring at his own palm as if awaiting divine inspiration. You offer to help a girl struggling with multiplication. She looks at you like you've offered her the secrets of the universe. Together you work through the numbers. When she gets the answer right, she claps once, quiet but proud. Nearby, two boys whisper loudly about whether reading too much can make your eyes fall out. The teacher glares lightly. They immediately return to their tablets with the speed of repentant squirrels. Later in the morning, the teacher tells a short story, a parable about generosity. The children lean forward, eyes shining, absorbing every word. In a place where life is hard and unpredictable, stories are more than entertainment. They're survival guides, moral compasses, and tiny windows into worlds beyond the village. This brings you to your scholarly debate requirement. Historians still argue whether Ottoman education systems fostered social mobility or mostly preserved existing hierarchies. Schools produced scholars, judges, calligraphers, and bureaucrats. But access was uneven. Many families simply couldn't spare their children from farm labour long enough for schooling to be a realistic path. You see that unevenness plainly when a girl, a bright one who answered every question, quietly leaves halfway through the lesson. Her mother arrives with a basket. There's work to be done. The girl looks longingly over her shoulder at the classroom, then follows her mother home. You feel a small, silent ache watching her go. When the lesson ends, children scatter like spilled lentils. Some run home for chores, some stay to copy letters. Others chase each other around the courtyard, shrieking joyfully. A boy pretends his tablet is a sword. A girl pretends her chalk is magic dust. Education fuels imagination, even when the system limits how far those dreams can reach. You help the teacher gather supplies. He wipes the board carefully, lost in thought. Do many children continue schooling, you ask? Some, he sighs. Most must work. A few will become scholars. Maybe one or two will reach the city academy. He pauses. A child's mind is vast, but life is narrow. He says it softly, with neither bitterness nor hope, just truth. You walk with him to the fountain where he washes his hands. He tells you he trained in a larger town, studied under a respected scholar, and dreamed once of writing books. But he returned home to teach because his village had no teacher. Knowledge, he says, must take root where it can, even in poor soil. His words settle in your chest like the hush before evening rain. As afternoon sun warms the courtyard, you see a few students lingering, practicing letters, whisper reading verses, showing off shaky handwriting to each other. One boy draws a crooked star and proudly declares he is an artist now. Another corrects him. That's not a star, that's a goat. The teacher just chuckles. When you finally step away, the children wave at you with chalk-dusted hands. You wave back, feeling a strange lightness, like you've brushed against something fragile and hopeful. Education here is rare, precious, imperfect, uneven, but alive. And as you walk back through the village, past the well, past the fields, past mothers calling children to chores, you realise something quietly powerful. Even in an empire where hardship presses down on every corner, knowledge is a tiny rebellion, a spark in the dark. You carry that spark with you as evening deepens. You wake to the distant rumble of something that doesn't sound like wagons, voices, or animals. At first, in that blurry space between sleep and waking, you think maybe your stomach is auditioning for an opera. But then the rumble grows, long, low, rolling beneath the earth like a beast turning in its sleep, and your eyes snap open. Oh no, not again. You scramble outside and instantly you see it. Villagers standing frozen, eyes wide, heads tilted toward the trembling ground. The earth shivers beneath your feet, just enough to send a jolt of fear up your spine. A few clay jars topple. A chicken screams. Yes, screams. A dog bolts under a cart. Mothers grab their children. Everyone holds their breath. Then, as suddenly as it began, the tremor stops. For a heartbeat, the whole world is silent. Until a man nervously jokes, "Well, that was energizing." No one laughs. Today, you're stepping into life with natural disasters in the Ottoman Empire. Earthquakes, fires, floods, forces that cared nothing for sultans, soldiers, taxes, or your plans for breakfast. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Ottoman Empire faced frequent natural disasters. Istanbul alone endured devastating earthquakes in 1509, 1766, and many other years. Fires were common due to wooden buildings packed tightly together. Floods swept farmlands. These disasters shaped architecture, policies, migration, and most importantly, daily fear. As you stand in the village square, people shake off the shock and start inspecting damage. A few cracks in walls, a broken clay pot, a shifted roof tile. Luckily, nothing catastrophic this time, but you can feel it in the air, the reminder that the ground beneath you is not loyal. Women whisper prayers, men reinforce fences. A boy asks if the earth is angry. An elder responds, "No, just stretching its legs." You walk toward the well to check for damage. The water inside ripples gently, reflecting the shaken sky. A girl peeks in beside you and asks if earthquakes can swallow villages whole. You tell her gently, "Not today." She nods, half reassured. Soon after, villagers gather in cautious conversation. Will there be another? Should we sleep outside tonight? My cousin swears he saw lightning under the ground. Lightning! Don't listen to him. He also thinks goats understand politics. While they debate, you notice a new smell drifting on the wind. Smoke. You turn. Far off, beyond a hill, a plume of grey rises like a warning finger pointed at the sky. Fires. The Empire's other great terror. Travel with fire long enough and you'll understand why Ottoman nights were filled with firewatch patrols. In a world of wooden beams, oil lamps and dry summers, all it took was one spark, one careless candle, one overturned brazier, one lightning strike, for disaster to rip through a town faster than anyone could react. A caravan passing through confirms your fear. A fire broke out in a nearby settlement. Not large, they say, contained quickly, but the message is clear. Nature plays no favourites. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Some Ottoman cities employed men whose only job was to run through streets at night shouting warnings and checking for flames. Essentially human smoke detectors, except louder and slightly judgmental. A group of villagers begins discussing repairs. You join them, helping lift a broken beam. Someone remarks that every time they fix the house, the earth tries to rearrange it again. Another says, "Maybe we should build houses on wheels." Everyone stares at him. He shrugs. "Just an idea." You continue wandering, and the day isn't finished showing you trouble. Dark clouds gather above the distant hills. Thick, heavy, ominous clouds. The kind that look like they're plotting. A shepherd sighs beside you. "It's going to rain," he says. "The bad kind." And he's right. Within hours the sky opens with full dramatic flare. Thunder rolling, lightning stabbing, rain slamming the earth so hard it feels personal. The village churns with frantic motion. People run to secure roofs. Animals scatter. A woman dives after laundry that tries to escape down the lane. And then the water rises. Not a flood, yet. But the roads become muddy rivers. The fields fill with puddles deep enough to confuse ducks. And the small stream north of the village begins to swell ominously. This leads seamlessly to your scholarly debate requirement. Historians still argue whether Ottoman infrastructure, bridges, drainage systems, city planning, was sufficient to handle frequent natural disasters, or whether administrative negligence made disasters far worse. Some argue the empire responded well for the era. Others say repairs were slow and preventative planning rare. Standing in ankle-deep mud, watching a chicken float by like a tiny feathered philosopher, you lean toward, could have been better. Villagers scramble to dig channels to divert water from homes. Someone yells instructions. Someone else yells contradictory instructions. You try both. Neither work particularly well, but the effort counts. Thunder cracks overhead. A boy clings to your leg. A goat tries to climb onto a roof. The blacksmith curses loudly as water seeps into his forge. A woman carrying 2 toddlers wades through mud with heroic strength. Finally, after what feels like a full emotional year, the rain slows, then stops. The clouds drift away, suddenly innocent. The village is soaked, muddy, exhausted, but intact. People emerge cautiously, blinking at the dripping world. Relief shines in their eyes, then resignation, then laughter, tired, shaky, but real. A man jokes, "Well, at least the dust settled." A woman sighs, "Until tomorrow." Someone else adds, "Earthquake this morning, flood this afternoon. If fire shows up tonight, I quit." You help gather debris, fallen branches, loose stones, a shockingly muddy watermelon someone swears was green 5 minutes ago. Kids splash happily in puddles because children have never once respected the seriousness of anything. As evening settles, villagers gather by lantern light. They share food, bread a little damp, cheese a little crumbly, spirits a little bruised. Someone tells a story about surviving the Great Shaking of '54. Someone else claims he once fought lightning with a shovel. He did not, but you appreciate the confidence. You sit with them, tired but strangely grateful. Disasters remind people how fragile everything is. Homes, harvests, hopes. But also how quickly communities link themselves together like threads in a net. When the earth moves, people move too, toward each other. Later, as lanterns flicker against damp walls, you lie down on your mat. The ground beneath you feels steady again, quiet, peaceful. You whisper a hopeful plea to the universe, let tomorrow stay still. Because in the Ottoman Empire, nature is the one opponent you can't predict, bargain with, or outrun. All you can do is endure. You wake slowly the next morning, your muscles reminding you again that yesterday involved earthquakes, floods, emotional damage, and a chicken that nearly achieved flight. You stretch, groan, and shuffle outside expecting another day of mud, repairs, and anxious glances toward the sky. But today brings something different, something quieter, something glamorous? Not glamorous for you, of course. Your clothes are still damp, your hair still looks like it negotiated with lightning, and your sandals now make that sad squelch sound every time you walk. No, the glamour belongs to a world you rarely glimpse, the dazzling surface of the Ottoman court. Because as you make your way into the nearby town, you notice an unusual buzz, an excitement mixed with awe, envy, curiosity, and a sprinkle of dramatic whispering. People are gathering near the main road. Children climb barrels for a better view. Merchants abandon their stalls. Even donkeys perk up. A procession approaches, a royal caravan. And suddenly, the empire doesn't feel like mud and cracked walls anymore. It feels like gold. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Ottoman court, centered around the Topkapı Palace in Istanbul, was renowned for its opulence, ceremony, elite training schools, vast treasuries, and political intrigue. Sultans, viziers, eunuchs, and palace staff lived in a world of structured luxury unimaginable to most subjects. Today, you're witnessing the travelling tip of that glittering iceberg. The procession glides down the road like a moving painting. Richly dressed officials, musicians, guards in ceremonial helmets shaped like inverted buckets, but somehow majestic. Silk banners fluttering, horses draped in embroidered cloth. Even the dust rises politely, as if afraid to cling to anything this important. People gasp at the sight of jewelled belts, embroidered caftans, turbans wrapped in immaculate folds, and swords so ornate you're pretty sure they've never touched actual danger. A woman beside you whispers, "That coat alone costs more than my entire house." A man mutters, "That horse eats better than I do." A kid shouts, "Look! Shiny!" He's not wrong. Everything is shiny. Even the boots. As the caravan passes, trays of sweets are handed out by attendants whose clothing alone could fund 5 villages. You accept a piece of lokum dusted in powdered sugar. It's the most delicious thing you've tasted in months. You briefly consider abandoning your entire life to follow this caravan forever, but the glamour has a shadow. Behind the silk and gold you see the labourers, tired porters carrying chests, cooks hauling supplies, scribes managing endless documents, guards trying to keep the crowd from getting too close. Their clothes are simpler, their steps heavier. They sweat under the same sun you do. because someone always carries the weight of luxury. A quirky tidbit jumps into your mind. Ottoman palace kitchens were enormous, feeding thousands daily, and employed specialized guilds from bakers to syrup makers to egg experts. Yes, there were egg specialists. Imagine being the empire's official egg guy. Peak prestige. The caravan pauses so officials can rest. You watch as wealthy courtiers dismount with casual grace while attendants scramble to spread rugs, erect shade tents, and present silver trays of refreshments. Everything is intentional, precise, theatrical. You overhear two villagers whispering, "Do you think they know what a muddy floor feels like?" I doubt they've ever touched a muddy anything. One day, I'd like to sit on a silk cushion. You'd probably stain it. Meanwhile, a young boy stares in awe at a court musician tuning a long-necked lute. The musician catches his gaze and plays a short melody, soft, sweet, floating above the noise like a blessing. The boy's face lights up. You feel something soften inside you too. But then your eyes drift back to the villagers, the patched clothes, worn sandals, tired posture, and the contrast hits you like a cold wind. The palace sparkles precisely because everything outside it works tirelessly beneath that shine. And this leads smoothly to your scholarly debate requirement. Historians still argue whether the wealth of the Ottoman court enriched the empire by promoting arts, architecture, and innovation, or drained resources from ordinary people who rarely saw benefits. Some say the court's brilliance inspired unity. Others argue it highlighted inequality. Standing here now, you see both truths shimmer side by side. A commotion breaks your thoughts. A noble official approaches, demanding local supplies for the caravan: flour, fresh fruit, livestock. Villagers stiffen. Of course, luxury must be fed. The official's polite tone does not hide the expectation. A farmer steps forward reluctantly. A woman sighs as she hands over a basket of pomegranates meant for winter storage. A butcher parts ways with two lambs, muttering something about royal appetites. You feel the pinch on their behalf. For you, this caravan is a beautiful passing spectacle. For them, it's a fiscal earthquake. Yet, when the official thanks them and offers blessings from the Sultan, villagers straighten slightly. Pride flickers, even through hardship. Because despite everything, the court represents the empire's identity, its prestige, its history, its unbroken lineage of power. As the caravan prepares to leave, children chase after the horses waving wildly. Musicians strike up a lively tune. The air sparkles with dust, sunlight, and the faint scent of rosewater from the noble's garments. And then, just like that, the caravan moves on, leaving behind a road, a few flattened patches of grass, and a village buzzing with stories they'll repeat for years. You stand quietly, watching the last silk banner disappear over the hill. And then something remarkable happens. The glamour fades, and the familiar world returns. Women return to washing clothes, men fix fences, children argue about who saw the fanciest hat. Life resumes, worn, simple, grounded. You walk back with the villagers. They talk excitedly for a while, about jewels, horses, fabrics, but soon drift back to concerns of harvest, weather, and debts. Because the palace may glitter, but the empire runs on the strength of people like these, people who wake, work, worry, endure. As evening settles, lanterns glow in the village windows. You sit on a low wall, remembering both worlds you've witnessed today, the shimmering court and the humble hearth, and you understand something deep. In the Ottoman Empire, greatness and hardship exist in the same breath. The palace dazzles, but the people carry the weight. You inhale softly, exhale slowly, and watch the stars appear, equally bright for sultans and villagers alike. Dawn arrives quietly today, not with tremors, not with shouts, not with caravan horns or disgruntled camels, just a soft wash of pale gold stretching over the rooftops. You open your eyes slowly, almost suspicious of the calm. After everything you've endured in this empire, taxes, sickness, hunger, storms, officials who definitely overcharged you, goats with attitude, you almost don't trust the peaceful morning breeze brushing your cheek. But today is different. Not easier, life here rarely is, just gentler. You step outside. Villagers move with a slower rhythm, as if giving themselves permission to breathe. A blacksmith yawns so widely it looks dangerous. A baker stretches his arms like he's preparing to hug the entire sky. Women sweep doorsteps without urgency. Children kick a ball of bundled rags, arguing passionately about rules they are definitely making up on the spot. Today is not a festival or a rest day. It's simply the end of a long stretch of hardship, and the village is grateful for something small yet miraculous. An ordinary day. As you walk, you pass the fountain where women chat while rinsing vegetables. One greets you warmly. "You look less exhausted," she says. You thank her, even though you're pretty sure you still resemble a tired scarecrow. A group of elders sits beneath the fig tree, sipping tea and discussing something extremely serious. Whether the new rooster is too loud. One insists it crows at ungodly hours. Another says that's the point of a rooster. A third, half asleep, mumbles, "Wake me when it crows in the afternoon." You continue wandering through the village, taking in the sights. Cracked walls patched with fresh clay, fields still soft from yesterday's rain, children laughing near the well, newly washed sheets fluttering in the breeze like hopeful flags. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Despite the empire's size, power, and centuries of influence, the majority of Ottoman subjects lived lives defined by small routines: fetching water, tending animals, repairing tools, sharing meals. For them, survival wasn't a heroic tale. It was the quiet, steady work of endurance. You can feel that truth in every corner of this village. You stroll toward the outskirts where farmers prepare their fields. A young man waves you over, offering a warm piece of flatbread. It's simple, but delicious. Crisp edges, soft center, just a hint of smoke from the oven. You close your eyes and savor it. For a moment, it erases every ache in your body. Nearby, a woman harvests herbs from her garden. She explains which ones help with fever, which help with sleep, which keep insects away, and which, according to her grandmother, can stop jealousy. You ask if she's sure. She shrugs. "It works on my sister-in-law." You wander farther along the road, finding yourself beside a shepherd watching his flock with the peaceful patience of someone who has accepted that sheep will never, ever listen. He nods toward the hills. "Storms yesterday," he says. "Calm today. That's life, no?" You nod. He's right. In this empire, stability is its own kind of miracle. A quirky tidbit slips into your thoughts. Some Ottoman villagers believed that leaving a bowl of sweetened milk outside at night pleased wandering spirits, ensuring peaceful sleep. You glance at the houses as you pass. Sure enough, you spot a few bowls tucked near doors. Whether it's superstition or just an excuse to feed stray cats, you can't tell. As the sun climbs, the day warms. People settle into their chores. A carpenter sands a wooden door with slow, steady strokes. A seamstress hums while stitching a torn sleeve. A child sits cross-legged, drawing shapes in the dust, determined to create something beautiful from nothing but dirt and imagination. It's peaceful, yes, but as always, the empire's shadows linger, just beneath the quiet. You overhear a conversation at the bakery about rising grain prices. You see a worried glance exchanged between two mothers discussing winter stores. A farmer frowns at signs of pests in the crops. Life is never free of weight here. But today, the weight feels manageable, and this leads you naturally to your scholarly debate requirement. Historians still argue whether Ottoman subjects lived harder lives than people in neighbouring empires, or whether hardship simply looked different depending on geography, culture, and social structure. What's clear from your journey is that Ottoman life demanded resilience, physical, emotional, communal. You reach the village square by late afternoon. A storyteller stands on a crate, spinning tales for children who sit in a loose semicircle, leaning forward in delight. He speaks of clever foxes, brave warriors, magical trees, and trickster spirits who hide shoes. The children giggle. You smile. Stories have carried people through darker days than these. A woman taps your arm. "Stay for dinner tonight," she says warmly. You agree, touched by her kindness. She doesn't know your whole journey, the hunger, the storms, the corruption, the endless work, but she senses your fatigue the way villagers here sense rain. As dusk approaches, the village glows with lantern light. Families gather outside to share bowls of lentils, warm bread, olives, and figs. Someone brings out a battered lute and plays a soft, meandering tune. The air feels gentle, golden, forgiving. You sit on a woven mat beside the fire, letting warmth seep into your bones. Laughter floats around you. A baby squeals happily. Someone accidentally drops bread into the fire and yells dramatically, "No!" The entire village laughs. For the first time in a long time, you feel your shoulders relax. People here endure so much. Taxes, disease, hunger, the whims of nature, the demands of officials, the grinding weight of work. But they also laugh. They share. They rebuild. They rest when they can. They find joy in spices, stories, family, music, and moments like this. Small, bright embers in the endless dark. You inhale deeply. The scent of wood smoke and warm bread fills your chest. You exhale slowly. The fire crackles. A dog curls against your leg. The world softens, and as night takes its place in the sky, you realize something quietly profound. In the Ottoman Empire, survival is constant, but so is resilience. You have walked through hunger, storms, corruption, labor, fear, sickness, dust, mud, and exhaustion. But you've also glimpsed strength, beauty, tenderness, and community. Life here is hard, yes, but life here is alive. And now, as your eyes grow heavy, the village hums around you. A cradle of warmth, flickering firelight, and whispered lullabies. You settle against your blanket, allowing sleep to find you. Your journey through hardship ends not with struggle, but with rest. The night deepens softly around you now, stretching across the sky like a velvet canopy brushed with faint silver starlight. The last murmurs of the village fade into a gentle hush, doors closing, low voices drifting away, embers settling in the hearths. Even the animals quiet themselves, their movements slowing into the rhythm of sleep. You breathe in slowly, letting the cool air settle in your chest. Each inhale loosens the knots left from the day. Each exhale carries them away. Your shoulders grow a little heavier, in the comforting way that tells you rest is near. The earth beneath you feels steady tonight, warm from the fire, firm in a way that whispers safety. Let your mind ease now. Let the images soften. The flicker of lanterns, the curved silhouettes of clay rooftops, the faint glow of the moon resting on the hills. Let the dust of the long journey drift away. Let the worries you carried, quietly, constantly, set themselves down beside you. They can wait. This moment belongs only to calm. You hear the faint rustling of a breeze passing through fig leaves, turning the world into a soft lullaby. A few last sparks lift from the fire and float upward, tiny stars rising to join the sky. The warmth on your skin fades gently into cool night air, soothing and slow. Your breath deepens, your heartbeat softens, your thoughts loosen like knots untied. And as the village settles into peaceful sleep, so do you, wrapped in quiet, steadied by the long path you walked, and comforted by the knowledge that even in the hardest worlds, rest can bloom at the end of the day. Drift now, float gently. Let sleep take your hand,